And we are live. So, welcome to episode 6 of my live stream. This is a unique show because I'm trying for the first time streaming this both to my YouTube channel, which has active subscribers, and then also this is my first time on Twitch. So, I haven't really even fully figured out the platform, but I thought it would be fun to try to host this show on both. And it's a big experiment, so bear with me. But since I'm new to Twitch, I'll probably introduce myself a little bit. First off, I'll get into why I'm doing this at 12 midnight, but in a second. But let me just kind of frame what this show is going to be. So basically, I am a graphic novelist and cartoonist, and then my day job is being an art director. I've done that for about 6 years. Prior to that, I also have been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 15 years now, and mostly known for like T-shirts and stuff outside of what I do for my day job. But when I'm also a father and husband, and so like my working times for comics, which like the kind of comics I do are memoir and indie comics. So the market is smaller, so it's not like the most profitable endeavor. So in order for me to get these books done, I have to work at them rather late at night. So that's kind of a little bit about like why. I'll get more into that later, but that's a little bit about who I am. What this stream is basically I'm working on book 2, this of 2 stories, which is the sequel to my first published graphic novel that I hand wrote, hand lettered, hand inked. That's out right now through Marcosia Press, and you can actually pick up a copy of it and read the first volume, so that if you follow these streams, you'll know what it is I'm working on. So it's a comic that's about faith and mental illness. It takes place in like Portland, Oregon, and then crosses between that and California, and it's kind of following a journey through sort of like a guy who like starts off. The guy's me, of course, but it's basically looking back at a time in my life where I had like suicidal ideation and how I got there, and then just sort of breaks down mental illness and talks about like weird childhood stories. It's very like it's a very candid, like truthful autobiographical story. So I'll show you a little bit of it, and then we'll get into working on what I'm working on right now. Are the thumbnails for the second book. So anyhow, the first book looks like this. There's a lot of very detailed pages. I get kind of crazy with the details on the pages. And yeah, so that's what my final art looks like. And then it varies in style from like these more realistic pages to more cartoony pages, depending on the time and place that it takes place. So needless to say, these take a long time to create. That's the first volume. If you want, go pick that up. It's available at Amazon.com. And you can also request it from your local bookstore that they stock it, preferably indie bookstore. So yeah, so that's 2 stories. And you'll notice it says book 1. And right now I'm working on book 2. So this first one took me about 5 years to create. I'm hoping the second one does not take nearly as long. And I'm aiming to kind of have this done in about a year and a half. So we'll see how that goes. So what I do first is kind of script out the comics. So I have my script finished for the second book, which is like something I write out in prose. And then basically from there, I take the script, I break it down page by page to sort of be able to see like what the next panel sequences are and stuff. So I am about here. So you'll notice I even fold the pages. It's a very disorganized mess, but usually when I underline something, it's something I'm working on. And then I'll draw like a little line at the end when I've finished it off. That way I know what I'm mapping out. And then the way I like to think of the thumbnail is like a rough map for like what the final art will look like. So that's about 5 minutes about just what this is about and stuff like that. Probably way too long, but it's going to be a long formatted show. And I'm basically just going to talk about anything while I work. So yeah, so that's my thing. Welcome if you're kind of joining from Twitch. And once again, the weird time frame that this is going live, I'm not expecting that a lot of people will jump in the chats or join in live. But I was surprised. Like the last few days, I've had surprise visitors kind of show up pretty late into the morning. So why am I starting this at 12? Usually I start my art after my son is asleep around like 8:30. And today was one of those days where, and much like you'll notice this from yesterday too. By the way, if you guys are watching this on Twitch and you want to kind of see the first 5 episodes, go to YouTube and look for Joshua Kemble. And that'll take you to all the previous, on my page, it'll take you to all the previous streams. But anyhow, yesterday I was kind of struggling with this too, but today as well, where just when you're trying to do art, like everything gets in the way. Quite a lot of things get in the way. So today I had forgotten that we had, like, my wife and I had a bulk of paperwork from refinancing our house because the market's really good right now for refining, and so we decided to take the jump and do it because we could get a better percentage rate. So that's kind of what we did. But anybody who's bought a house or refinanced a house, like you would think it's kind of a simple process, but you end up with like a book's worth of pages to go through and like sign and stuff like that. I know it's not like it's not a problem most people would mind having, and we're really lucky to have a house, and so I appreciate it and all. But about like 50 forms later, where I've signed all these things, I was just exhausted. So I took a little power nap, and now I am awake and ready to rock and roll and work on this. So let's look at what we did yesterday. Yesterday, usually I try to do about a page of thumbnails a day, and yesterday, because it was a really late night and I hadn't like had a nap or any sleep or anything like that, I was like, I'm just basically going to get, this first row of panels done. And so I was able to do that. But tonight I'd like to finish this page. So we'll see how that goes. I should also mention, so another reason I'm doing these videos is I'm taking the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge. And it's a challenge started by my friend Kevin Cross, where every day for about 30 minutes minimum, which is not enough time at all to make comics, you're supposed to work on your comics. So the challenge is like, without breaks, can you, for 100 days in a row, like commit to working on your comic for at least 30 minutes? And it's very helpful, particularly for people who are struggling to find the time. My reason for doing it, my friend Scott Cirkland started doing the 100 days, and I just felt like, well, what the heck? Like, I already am doing about an hour a day working on this. I probably will be for the next year or so. So minimum. And that's what he and I kind of agreed on, was like the idea. This time it's going to be an hour, not just 30 minutes. And so, yeah, so we're doing that. And then if you miss a day, like, you're out of the challenge, or you just restart from day one. So it sounds simple in premise, but it is challenging to do anything for 100 days straight without a day off. I think I've completed like 2 of these before. And it's usually about the midway point where I get burnt out. And I just want like one day. and I think we're on like day 27. So yeah, I don't know. We started on the first. Technically, it's the 28th, but it's midnight, and so like to me, I consider this night, so it's the 27th in my head. All right, so that'll take care of that. That gets rid of all the intro stuff at the top, and now let's get into pages. So like because these are thumbnails, they don't look like the finished product. The idea is just to block out and kind of work out what I'm going to eventually gather photo reference, draw like perspective grids, um, basically like hand letter really tightly, do panel borders that are ruled, and all sorts of crazy stuff to make these much more realistic, especially in this style that I'm working in. So bear with me. These are kind of rough noodles, and what I'm trying to do is just kind of work out intellectually and uh, work out on the page like what I want the final page to roughly look like, and then from there I'll have that mapped out, and then from there I have to like rule out panel borders and go through all the meticulous stuff of like finishing these pages. So okay, so here we go. So we're at the sequence in the second book where my neighbor has like taken me hostage, which is insane. And I escaped my neighbor's house, ran across to the apartment across the way. We're in two apartments facing each other that are separated only by a spiral staircase, and now we're basically trying to figure out what to do. The police, we called the police. The police came. They didn't take us very seriously. I then called my brother, who's a detective, and he recommended that we basically like get a gun and kind of like protect ourselves, and also contact a detective at the police department. So we contacted the police department again. Detective kind of reiterates the same thing, like hold tight, we'll take your case and like file a report in the morning. But in the meantime, like you should probably consider getting a gun, which is strange. So uh, all cards on the table. I'm not like the most right wing person. I'm pretty left leaning actually, and so I kind of fit the trope of that, where I'm not like a big fan of gun ownership or anything like that. But this is autobiographical, and this is an actual story. And when this went down and we needed a gun, like I instantly called a friend who had a friend who was like the gun guy who like owned a whole bunch of firearms and stuff. So that's the point where we're at in the story. We're introducing ourselves to a guy named Troy. I realized after going to sleep last night that I forgot a few like key things about Troy. And then aside from that, so I'm gonna revise probably the panel to the right a little bit, just add a little info. I also realized I have two guys named Troy that are two separate characters, one in the first book and then one in this. And I'm gonna put a little asterisk just to clarify to people that it's not the same Troy. So yeah, okay, well, let's get into it. And as I work, usually when I'm like writing, I can't talk much, and then I'll just kind of field questions or anything like that in the chats if anyone shows up. If not, like I'll just kind of talk about what's on my mind. So if you're new to this, welcome, and I hope to catch you on a future stream as well. So, okay, here we go. So I wanted to add like an asterisk. I don't even know if I'm saying that word right. Like that's one of those ones. Is it asterisk or asterix? I think it's asterisk, but it's a strange word to say. It just sounds weird. And I think I'll have like a comic book trope. Maybe have it line up here. Yeah, that's not gonna work. That would be cool to have it like line up there. Is that really big from a distance? No. Okay. So I think I'll have it here then. Okay, let's try it here. Okay, here we go. Different. It's supposed to be a fairly humorous part of like an onslaught of like really heavy um, and dark material and information. So um, okay, here we go. I'm gonna just blot out this part. Okay. So when I have stories that are pretty serious and heavy-handed, I try to give a little bit of humor and like lightheartedness to it, and have like little moments of like a tension break. And like I said, the last two chapters I've been working on for this have just been like tension building on tension because it's close to the climax of the story. So different Troy than the Troy. Okay, and this can get a little smaller. So a lot of this, especially when you're working on roughs, it's like it is so loose and not like I'm not being very precious. Um, okay, okay, so we got that taken care of. I kind of have a little bit of the background showing, maybe some of those stars, just to like clarify. I also have to add glasses and a beard, I think, to this dude. Because from what I recall, he had glasses and a beard, and I kind of forgot that yesterday. So that should be interesting. That's been one really crazy thing about like the comics I've been doing are memoir, and what's interesting about it is um, how much your memory can like play tricks on you in the sense of forgetting someone had glasses or like forgetting little details and uh, it's kind of makes you really scrutinize yourself and also have to scrutinize your stories because it's like I do think what makes really compelling memoir is when a story is as close to truth as you can possibly be. um, and so I do think that might be interesting. Um, to just kind of think about for a little bit. Okay, so there's that. Now I need to I'm going to add a little bit here. Um, all right, here we go. Pull this over. All right, so I'm going to add, I think he had kind of roundish glasses. And I talked about this on yesterday's stream, but whenever you're drawing characters, even if you're loosely roughing them out or whatever, usually when I draw through the objects as opposed to like if you drew the glasses before drawing what the glasses are over, like you'll have this kind of weird slapped on look. So um, I believe he had like a beard. That kind of went a little higher. So this is a fun part, basically. It's going to have these kind of comic book intros. I've done this before, this trope before. Kind of, maybe I can find the page if I have to take a break or something when I'm working to show you. Well, let me find it. there's a page in this that I did. And I wish I could remember every page like clockwork, but here it is. It's going to be here. So like I do pages like this sometimes where it's like a superhero spread, and using that as like a formulaic like comic book cover kind of layout. Sometimes just to lighten the mood, because this book deals with really heavy topics, and so like I said, it doesn't hurt to have like a lighter topic here or there. Okay, so now we're going to get into the thumbnails. And what you're going to see too is I have all these layers like underneath the layer I'm working on in Photoshop. And those are literally just previous previous pages that, so when I'm working on thumbnails, I'll just copy the page over and then kind of break up the panels so I can use them for reference, just to make sure I'm sequentially staying consistent. Like, you know, if a character's holding something in their right hand, hopefully it doesn't switch to their left suddenly very quickly or something like that. Okay, so here goes. Now it's going to be like, oh, here. Let me see here. I have like the, might even kind of roughly sketch it over, because this was one other thing I mentioned yesterday. This dude was a fan of the right to bear arms that I knew. And he was definitely like the don't tread on me flag type dude. So I was going to have him have like a, that kind of behind here. And then obviously this is just a thumbnail, so working out what I'll need later on. Okay. All right. Look at that. Revision's done. We're in only like 20 minutes so far. That's a little long. I always kind of crack up at how long it takes me to do the simplest thing. I'm a slow artist, but I've managed to make it work for me. Okay, so here we're going to work out the next section, next panel. And I think for this, I'm probably just going to have yeah, it actually works. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I'm going to look up a don't tread on me flag real quick. Okay. I love it. And I know it's not like the most exciting thing to hear about in a stream. I just wanted to explain the dead space there. And then here we go. Okay, here we go. Oh, dude, Chris Kawagua, my good friend, is joining in the chats and calling it the late night power hour. I kind of feel the same. Like last night, it was kind of fun. I didn't think anyone would be up working, and then I have to remember, as creatives, like we're all kind of doing. Even those of us who are like fortunate enough to do it for a living, most of us are working on these on our own things with with you know, like with whatever spare time we have, because like we're lucky enough to be doing a hustle making art for paid work. But if we're trying to do things like this where it's like our own vision that we're wholly creating, it's just like tacking it on. I love this. Chris said replace the don't tread on me with the Cobra Commando's logo flag. I like that. It's hilarious. Yeah, so right now I'm trying to kind of figure out, okay, I need to block in the type. So we'll do that. So it says Troy happened What are you working on, Chris, to be a huge Second Amendment buff? I used to be a lot more kind of like pro gun ownership and gun rights and stuff like that. And then as I got older, the whole thing just kind of collapsed. Like in the sense of I just started thinking about it a little more. And like at first it sounded like, yeah, I mean, because I'm a guy who I like the Constitution and I like our country and stuff. And so I was like, well, if the Constitution says it, right? And then I had heard like these arguments where people were saying, like, it's basically so you can defend yourself if the government becomes tyrannical or something like that. So, like, for a while, like in my younger, like, if you talked to me like 15 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, dude, like, people should have the right to bear arms. Um, and then as I got older, I started paying a little more attention to the well regulated part in the Second Amendment. And then beyond that, I also just started thinking about like how me block this in real quick. But it was just like one of those things of like how could you possibly defend yourself against the government if it got really tyrannical? like like because I mean like the full out military has, like tanks and massive weapons and stuff like that like are beyond. I don't think most of us would want like our neighbor to own like a functional tank. Although I would respect somebody more who's like very pro gun ownership, like, and I mean like I'm not talking like small guns and but like people who want like large capacity magazines and stuff like that. Like, um, if they're more consistent with it and they're like, yeah, like people should be able to, you know, have whatever weapon, no matter how large or hard to defend from. And then I started thinking about like nuclear bombs, and I was realizing like I think it's good that that's regulated. Like, like my neighbor can't own that. And I read a little bit of the statistics on like crime in different states, and I realized, and then in different countries, and I realized like the places that have the highest gun regulation actually tend to have less gun violence, and so their murder rate actually usually is lower. And I know there's like false statistics that spread around in like NRA crowds and stuff, but they're very easily debunked. Where they'll cite like one city, like it'll be a city like Boulder, Colorado, that has pretty loose gun rights, but it's also like a city that has like a completely different culture than most cities. And so like yeah, the rate of violence is lower there, but they'll make this false equivalency where they'll be like, that's because everybody owns guns there. And they usually will like nitpick like, the stats. And I always find that really, anytime I'm trying to think about stuff, I think about like would this be an easy argument to make by like picking and choosing like a few stats, or would this be like a broad consensus kind of statistic that actually backs the point? And anyhow, for me, I'm not like religious about it. Like I don't particularly like think it's like something that like I judge if like somebody doesn't agree with it. But at the same time, I've started becoming more and more staunchly like I just don't think like people should own guns, and maybe we should rent them or something if we need them for like going shooting, which is super fun. Or like maybe we should allow licenses for people who hunt, or actually use it as a utility. But outside of that, I've started turning more and more that way, which I know is like super fun to say. But anyhow, this show also I'm going to be a little more open about like my viewpoints on stuff and things like that. Let's see. Chris says he's getting crafty and stitching a leather holster, but a Star Wars blaster for me. I love it. Yeah. Dude. Yeah, I really dig Chris gets pretty awesome with his like cosplay. It's just pretty rad. I think it's cool when somebody's older and they don't mind like delving into the nerddom because like that's sort of the coolest thing in the world. Um, yeah, so I'm all about it. Plus, it's super fun. Like, you know, I love getting in like crazy lightsaber battles, and I get in them now with my son. But that's not why I had lightsabers. We had those far before we had a kid. It is really fun though to run around the house and have crazy lightsaber battles and stuff. Okay, so this is going to be that Second Amendment buff thing. Okay, here we go. Like I said, this series of panels coming up is going to be like the kind of humor break, and I do think that's something like as cartoonists we should always kind of be considering when we're writing. Um, like how do we kind of break the tension or add tension? Um, and if we're trying to tell serious stories, like you don't want to get so overloaded with seriousness that it's just impossible to process. And these books deal with some really heavy topics, so it's like you need these little breaks. Almost think of it like a breakdown in a song. If your song was just verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus over and over again with no breakdown, um, it would just get pretty monotonous, you know. So it's like the breakdown. Okay, here he's going to be doing the Dio horns. Do do do. Actually, I think that might be the wrong face for this. My hope is to like kind of work through this and knock out a page tonight. Um, so probably like another hour or so, which I'm pretty excited about. Okay, I see. His body's too high. I had a different head pose there. The "Don't Tread on Me" flag will be coming in. Boom. Do. Okay. I am also like over sketching and I need to just do less noodly. All right. Doesn't make sense. Palms facing out. Okay. Okay, here we go. Gonna just check out how I made his face. I can replicate that. Actually, I wanted his eyes more up here. Okay. Okay, that actually makes sense. And like I said, super loose with just kind of moving through trying to kind of block out these pages. Okay. There we go. I'm kind of loving how this is coming out. Okay. Do 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 do. Wider jaw, a little bit on the chubbier end. All right. So there we go. Kind of got this guy. So, Chris, are you using actual leather for the holster that you're making for your blaster? So, yeah, thanks, man. Digging the typography of breaking up the talking heads. Yes. And the nice thing about this is there's a little more narrative freedom in this section too, where it's like sometimes talking head panels like call for talking heads, and you can kind of 99 panels them to like try to break them up. And I'm talking about like the 99 panels that always work. Wally Wood's little cheat sheet for conversation sequences, so they don't get all talking headish. But at the end of the day, like if you have like a phone conversation that's lasting 20 hours or something, it's at some point you're gonna have some talking heads. Okay, this guy's rocking the plaid, which is actually pretty awesome. I do dig plaid. But yeah, so it's nice to finally, for anybody who hasn't been following these streams, it's like the last 5 or so pages that have had the thumbnail have all taken place kind of with a, okay. They've all taken place with it's like a phone call. And so it's like a call to the police, a call to my friend, like a lot of different calls that are important kind of story beat moments, but it's one of those things where it's funny. Talked about this before with other people too. I forgot they had like this loopy snake on there. I think the snake like kind of goes thick, thinner, and then you got your like. Don't tread on me. I saw this really funny meme that's probably really played out at this point, but it was during the protests that were going on like pre chaos at the Capitol, where people were protesting, you know, against police brutality and for Black Lives Matter. And this meme went around that was like the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, but it was like it said at the bottom, "We like cops now," and that was kind of funny. Where it's like, it is one of those, like, really? I don't know. I thought it was funny, but there's U.S. flag on the wall here. Okay, very hastily sketched, but we got a thumbnail in, and that is not bad for what I need to do. So there we go. Okay. Now I'm just gonna add a little bit of shade here. Yes. And we've got our kind of sequence. But yeah, it's nice when you're in a narrative element where you can kind of bounce around. It doesn't even have to be in the same location. Genuine cowhide and rivets for this shoulder holster. That's awesome. Yeah, Chris is a crafty dude. You can check out chriscaliua.com to check out his stuff, but he's a prolific illustrator and artist, but also like constantly working on like cool stuff. Like I am I crazy, Chris? I thought like for a second, did you build a tiki bar for your backyard? It looks like you were finishing up a tiki bar, and it looked pretty cool from what I saw on Instagram. And the thing that's always kind of cool about Chris is like a lot of people, including myself, will be like, it would be cool if, and then just kind of let it die because it's like, well, yeah, but then I'd have to learn how to like do woodworking and or learn how to do this thing. And then Chris is just the guy who's just like, no, I'm going to make that happen. Like, and figures it out. So, you know, even with things like a tiki bar or, you know, creating like a detonator for, from Star Wars, like just I don't know. I always kind of admire that about Chris, like the fact that he'll just kind of do it and get his hands dirty and figure it out, you know, which is a good attitude. And I think a lot of that kind of mentality is really important in comics because these things don't just make themselves. It'd be cool if they did, but they don't. Oh, Chris, the tiki bar is ready for when we can have parties again. Oh, you know, I miss parties. I miss socialization. It's been really weird during this whole time of lockdown. Even today was a little tense because when you're signing a refi, because we refied to get like a lower interest rate on our house, and we had to sign this like mountain of paperwork. But the weird thing is, because of the type of thing it is, you actually have to do that in front of a now I'm blanking out on what they're called. It's like people are licensed to do like a birth certificate or whatever. What is that called? Yeah, it's too late in the night for me to. If you guys think of it, let me know. If you think of it, Chris, let me know. But anyhow, so it's like the guy who authenticates things that are licensed. Thank you, Chris. The notary public. So today, like right after getting off work, like we had to have a notary public come to us, and they're like a contract notary public who had to like sit in our house and see us physically sign everything. And during a pandemic, it's not really the most fun thing. So we had like we had like this long table set up, and then tried to like keep as socially distanced as possible and mask up, and then like even his notary process is all full of like disinfectants and stuff. So like we hand him our license, and he's like, you know, getting all that info in, and then he's like wiping down the cards to get back to us. It's the craziest. It's just a weird era in time where like a transaction like that would in most normal times be complicated but not strange to have to like have someone physically there or be physically at like an office or whatever where somebody is able to notarize something. It was just fascinating, like seeing that whole process. But man, it was tiring because it's like, I mean, it's like a book of paperwork. I always kind of joke like if somebody wanted to get like the rights to your firstborn child or something, they just sneak it into like a mortgage paperwork packet, and like you'd have like most human beings would have no idea what they were signing. Let's see here. But I will say, man, like interest rates are crazy low. And I usually wouldn't even care about that. I don't even understand markets or anything like that. Okay. So I got this. Okay. Okay. Gonna work this out. Okay, so this I might draw from memory, which is going to be bad because I don't really know guns. I know the particular models that these were, but I would have to actually look them up. But I've realized like that might be fairly wasteful for me to spend a bunch of time at the thumbnail stage roughing out different guns. So I'm going to kind of off the top of my head just kind of try to kind of remember the kind of guns he had. I think he had a Glock, and I do not, for the life of me, remember everything about a Glock. So that's kind of the basic structure of one. Although I think I'm drawing more of a Beretta. I think they're usually a little more snub nosed, but that will do. It's funny. Yeah, I am not a guy who knows a lot of like guy stuff. I think the last like even hiking and camping and stuff like that, like I was like a part of like a thing called Weeblos when I was a kid, which was like this transitionary thing between Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. And it was interesting. You know, you learned a lot of cool stuff like woodworking and um, you know, so like getting to use like stuff in a machine shop and make like a mug out of like a glass bottle, like just a bunch of kind of interesting stuff. But you also like had stuff like, you know, like making your own balsa wood boats and stuff like that. Oh, nice. Chris is looking at an airsoft gun right now to mold this leather. Yeah, I think those are great. Like it's Chris, were those airsofts like when we were in college, were those around? Like I feel like they weren't as available, but they're great references if you have to draw like an action sequence. Because as much as I was just talking about being, you know, like not a fan of gun ownership, like and some of that has to do with just like my own philosophy too, where I feel like um, part of being a believer in like a caring God is like putting trust in God and like your own well being. Not that you don't have to defend yourself or anything like that, but I do feel like it's like a bit of an act of faith to not fall for fear. But all that being said, that was a rambly thing. But my point is, um, I think that like um, now this is a weird one that I should look up because it's going to become. Um, there we go. Yeah, we talked about they're great for reference for action scenes. Yeah, airsoft. Anyhow, so my whole point of that whole rant was basically like I do think it's really fun to draw guns, and it's really fun to draw shoot 'em up scenes, and like it's fun to watch action movies that have tons of guns, and so I'm not like so anti-gun that I don't remember the kid in me that's like it's super fun to like run around with a fake gun and go pew 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 and you know like shoot at stuff. Like it's just it's fun, and I have gone shooting at a range and stuff, and it is super fun. So all that being said, like I do see the appeal. This one's weird. Like, I'm wondering if I should look it up because it's going to come in later in the story. But there's a specific model. Okay, it's called a bolt action Lee Enfield number 4. It's like a gun from the from World War One. This one I have to look up. It'll help. Although, like, I'm still gonna have to look it up later, but because I'm gonna actually have to get into sequencing with it, this is the kind of Lee Enfield. Bolt action Lee Enfield number 4, make 1. Okay. So, okay. I just need to see how that thing looks because that's a little bit more of like a westerny style gun. I think they were really popular. Well, it's going to get more into the history of that gun because that plays into the story. So that's why I'm like, that one actually has to look a little more like the thing. Although not as close as it will in the final. This is a very strange section of the story, but it's partially to alleviate. It's partially being told because it's just really strange. Like, I feel like with autobio, to me, the things that compel me to write, that I want to start writing about more often, are like things that are just super weird that happened, as opposed to just like kind of standard everyday slice of life. Although I think sometimes like the standard everyday slice of life stuff can be really beautiful. It's just like, for me, there have been some things that have happened in my life where I'm just like, that there has to be a story about that. And like things where enough people have told me like that is not normal. Like, to where I'm like, okay, I think I have some stuff to write about. Not that I'm anything special, but it's just I guess I've been fortunate or unfortunate enough to have some really strange things happen that make for pretty interesting content. Okay, this is way not super accurate, but I am gonna tighten these up. So you had a shotgun, like your kind of standard shotgun, which just probably looks nothing like. And then he had I think they usually have like a stock there. Then he had that bolt action Lee Enfield, and then I think just a standard Glock. Again, thumbnails, not trying to be precious, but be tight enough to where it saves me work in the long run. Okay. And we are coming up on the first hour. Holy crap. So, like, one of the things I like about the idea of doing this stream too is to normalize again the process of work being part of art, and the fact that it's this like thing you have to show up for every day. And so I think like I think it's just kind of a cool idea. Yeah. And then what else? What was the other thing? Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, he had like a Colt or something like that. It was like an old Western gun. Um, and it's funny because I think most boys that I know, like who grew up in the '80s, can draw at least a rough approximation of a gun. Because there is this like weird thing. I noticed this with my son too. Um, this was not a snub nose. That's what I was thinking. I think. Anyhow, but like there is this weird thing in boys, and not all boys, but a lot of boys, where when they're little, they just get like really into like violence, like not real violence, but like play violence. And I've totally seen it with my kid because like before we ever got him like a toy gun or toy sword or like a lightsaber, any of that stuff, he was like pretending things in his room were guns, like, and shooting them. And it was weird because it's not like he was even getting that from like TV shows or anything. I think it's just he gleaned whatever little thing he saw and was like, "That's cool because they're fighting." And like I also think some of it is evolutionary in a weird way, where I think it like might be a holdover from like hunter gatherer times when in order to survive in like a pack, like you see this with and this is me armchairing this, like I have no idea. I'm just speculating and it may not be like that profound, but it's like if you look at like nature documentaries and stuff and you look at young um kids and stuff, like not kids but like young animals, they do like play fighting, like so you look at like a group of dogs or even like chimpanzees, like which are a little closer to us biologically. Like if you look at them, it's like the babies, the children are play fighting so that when they get older, they can like beat the crap out of each other. And like it's like this weird thing where it's like they're also doing that so they have survival skills for when like a crazy predator comes after them. And so I do think there's a holdover in that with people too, where it's like you're kind of learning strength and you're learning how to wrestle and kind of like survive in this world. So it's interesting. I don't know. Fantasy violence is an interesting way our lizard brains work out some evolutionary habits, I think. I totally agree. And I do think there's like an exercise part of it too. And I do think there might be like a lineage part of it too, where it's like in nature, usually, it's like you uh, are born into a pack with like an alpha or something. And then like the alpha is the alpha until usually like their kid can like outdo them and like wrestle them. And then it's like once that happens, it's like the new alpha and kind of the cycle of life. Not all tribes and groups and stuff, but it's like it's just an interesting thing to think about. Like I wonder if that's part of the drive. But it is fun, man. It's fun to run around and play fight. I actually didn't realize like how fun that was. Like you kind of lose touch with that until you're like around a 7-year-old who's like like the minute I got off work yesterday, he ran up to me with a bow and arrow, he's got like this Minecraft bow and arrow, and he like tosses me this other plastic bow and arrow, and he's like, "Bow and arrow fight now!" Like it's like literally like a minute after I got off work, so we're like running around the house, like shooting each other with bow and arrows, and it's just fun, but really fascinating. But anyhow, like so, I do think there's something in us, I don't know, that like really likes guns and stuff. Even if we don't think people should own them in general. So, okay, let's see here. All right, we're at the hour mark. So I'm going to take a very quick, like 1 second break, and then I'll be right back to kind of knock this out. But actually, I'm pretty confident about this because now I'm at the well close to the halfway point. So I kind of did myself a favor yesterday by doing the top row because it turns out the last 2 nights I've had to start super late. Yeah. Oh, Nick Bernstein. Yes. Yeah. Burning the midnight oil. And then he said, don't burn yourself out. Dude, that is a very good point. It's well, you'd have to backtrack on the stream, but it's basically like part of why I'm up. I had forgotten today was the day we had to sign a bunch of paperwork for a notary public to like they had to come, and we did the socially distanced notarized signing of um, our refi of our mortgage, because like we had we had a really good interest rate on our house, but interest rates are like abnormally low, and so we refied just to get the rate lower and locked in. And then I had forgotten that we actually had to have the notary come here and then go through like this pile of paperwork that's about that tall, where it's just like, this is this, sign here, initial here, and you're doing that for like 2 hours. So that's part of why I'm starting late. So basically, after that whole process and my crazy day at work and stuff, I was like, I'm going to take a nap and then I'll stream. So thus the late hours. But I do have a feeling that's going to be happening more and more. Yeah, dude. Nick, yeah, definitely, dude. If you're if I need to do that, you're talking about refining. Yeah, dude. It's worth looking into, because I was shocked. Like it was. We had a really good rate. We bought at a good time where like the rates were low, but like right now they're just beyond low. So anyhow, I'd recommend look into it. Although then again, I don't know if this is our first time refining, so I have no idea. It might be a stupid decision. It seems really good. The numbers seem good and stuff. So, but it is a headache and time consuming. So that's why I'm starting late. All right, so give me like 20 seconds and I will be right back. Yeah, okay, cool. Because it's at the hour mark. So. Oh, let's see. I like it. Yeah, it wasn't that long of a break. It was just like literally, I still vape a little bit, not as often as I used to. But because I picked up the bad habit of smoking when I was younger, and like so, vapes are like the only thing that keep me from smoking cigarettes. So, but anyhow, that's a really interesting thought. I don't know about staying in California either. We live in the Antelope Valley in California, so that's like part of how we're able to afford a house and stuff. Because like, um, there are spots in California that it's just it's almost untenable to live, which is the price of rent or mortgages or anything like that. It's like it's as an artist with the income levels most of us are dealing with. It's like it's impossible. So I think had we not found a house, we probably would have done that. Yeah, go Chris. Chris is rocking some comics. Dude, I want to see more Chris comics. It's been a while, Chris. I want to see more comics. Um, Chris has a comic called The Sunless Circus that's really good that I'd recommend, and it's a whole series. So there's like quite a few issues, and they're all really good. Um, is that what you'll be working on, Chris, or are you thinking about a different comic than The Sunless Circus, which is about the robot who is daydreaming of his dream job of becoming an accountant, which I still think is a great premise. Another Fable story. Nice. Is this the one with the bird? Like a continuation of that? I'm curious. All right, so blocking out this next panel. It says I told. Okay, now it's got to cut back. So that's like kind of a fun little break. It's gonna come back to. I do think when I readdress these, I might unbox some of these boxes or play with the sizing when it comes to like the final layout. And so like that process is really weird where I'll take the thumbnails and then I work out all my panel borders for the page. That's what I did in the first two stories, but now I'm thinking of doing it differently. um, Oh, I love this. I got incredibly lucky about when the market was the absolute lowest, but my best friend is Thai and moved back to Bangkok. His cost of living is so low now, it's crazy. And actually, I have a buddy who's an expat who moved to Thailand. He mainly did it because he married uh, a citizen there. So, like, it kind of made sense because he had like a little bit of help on the language transition. Um, it's weird. I really like the U.S. and I love California. And Nick, Chris's comic is at chriskawagua.com. But Chris, you should throw the URL in the links so he can check that out. Nick was curious. But yeah, so he expatted and stuff. But like for me, the language barrier would be tough. And then just from like half of like the location of this comic is two stories. Like the first book takes place when we moved to Portland, and if you read the book, you'll see like that move didn't go so well. But I do think like part of why like when my wife and I moved there, outside of the events that I'm writing about now in the comic, like these weird circumstances and stuff that led to kind of like a mental breakdown. There's also like this weird atmosphere in the Northwest where you never get sunlight, and it starts really affecting your mood and your thoughts, and like it's just kind of a drag because it's always raining. And it made me, because we lived there for, I don't know, Chris might actually remember how long, but I think it was like 4 or 5 years. And yeah, maybe it was less. But anyhow, the point being, we lived there for quite a few years, and like it just drags on you. And it's like I realized, like from living out of California, that I like California a lot. Um, but yeah, we lucked out too, where yeah. Oh, I love it. Nick's totally like on the same page. I lived in Seattle and hated it. Yeah, and I visited Seattle like last year, like well, I think it was last year. Maybe it was a little earlier. My year timing starts slipping the older I get. but but yeah, I visited there, and it's funny because it's definitely a city to visit. It's like holy crap, it's beautiful. Like the city's really cool. The architecture is really awesome. There's like a vibrance of the downtown that is like akin to like New York, or a city where people kind of actually travel in. Where it's like LA, you don't get that same buzz of energy walking around the city because like it's not really like a walking city. You can walk in the city, but it's just like I don't feel like that electricity that you feel in kind of like cities that have better commuting systems and stuff. But that being said, um, I would probably hate Seattle because just that weather. So that's one thing. But yeah, we looked out when we bought too, where it's like we bought at a time like right after, a little bit after the recession, and it just we just kind of lucked out because I was looking for places near where I work, um, and my wife and I were living in an apartment in Long Beach, and the commute was just way too long. Like I have a long commute now, but it's nowhere near what it was then. And so we were like, okay, we'll find a nice apartment. And we started looking for apartments, and we noticed like the cost you pay monthly for an apartment in like all of the areas we were looking would cost more than just like if we could somehow salvage and save up a down payment, like the mortgage payment ended up being lower than what we'd be paying for rent. And so we were like, let's do it. And we found a house shortly after that, but we had to like kind of move in with family for a little bit, save up the down payment and stuff. And then yeah, then we just lucked out. But it's now, if we had to buy in this area, we probably couldn't afford it because it's literally like doubled. what it was worth when we bought it. It's twice as much, and it's only been 6 years, so it's kind of weird. Dude, I need to go to Emerald City. I love that. Yeah, Chris was saying I'm too used to California weather, but Emerald City Comic Con, yeah, I've heard so many good things, and I still haven't gone to Emerald City. I'm kind of curious. This also I envy, dude. And that's something I miss about Portland too. Was Portland had a pretty happening music scene, not nearly as good as Seattle's, but close. Because I was kind of there at like that time where it was getting really artsy. I've heard it's gotten way worse since I moved there. But the time I was there, it was like, they have like a comic book month where the entire city just like celebrates comics for a month, and like all the bookstores just like front face their stores with comics. It's like very like, yeah, on an art level and food level. Although I will say this, like, and this is a bummer, especially if you're someone like me where you like love breakfast burritos and like Mexican food, but like the Mexican food in like any place in the Northwest is not, it's so bad. It's so bad. And they think it's authentic. It's weird. We even had that in Seattle when I went and visited. I went to dinner with somebody who was local there, and they were like, yeah, there's this really authentic place. Because, we were kind of like, where do you want to eat? And he's like, dude, it's really authentic. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm from California. I'm probably not going to like it. He's like, no, it's super authentic. So we go to this like artisanal Mexican food place. It was like the worst thing. I mean, it tasted like if you took Rubio's version food and then like let it sit out and like dry and like lose all its flavor. It's like a notch down from like a chain place. Anyhow, it just cracked me up. Yeah, told friends that if they can't afford to buy a place in LA, they should buy somewhere else and rent it just so they can get in the market. Yeah, dude. I mean, that's something I've thought about really a lot recently. Yeah, dude, Chris, it should be a deal breaker for you, man. It's so bad. It's so bad. I've even seen that in like Arizona, I'd say is kind of there with it, but it's still not. They just can't touch what we do. The only other state I've been to that does an interesting take on Mexican food is nowhere near as good as what we have. But the only other state I've been to that has it's like a different vibe of Mexican food. It's like its own thing, but it does have like this authentic vibe to it, but it's unique and like spicy and crazy is New Mexico. So my wife's grandma lives there, and we went, and it was just like the food was not, it's not like the kind of, I don't know, it's got a like Tex-Mex vibe to it, but like super hot. And that was actually okay and tolerable, but still like nothing touches what we do. But yeah, Nick, I mean, that's part of why we bought too, was like, I have a kid, and the more I've thought about it, like the more, like I grew up fairly poor, and like and it's because I have just like generations of family like never owned property. Like we always were just kind of scraping by with like what we had. um and I don't think we ever really had any property, and so like that makes a massive difference for like, I mean, I had a happy childhood and stuff, so like that's cool, but I do think your financial future depends a lot on sort of like those investments in like having property is a, I don't know, I'm not saying it's the only thing, but to me it makes sense that would help your future generations to like kind of not have to freak out all the time. I don't know, that's the theory of it, but we'll see. We haven't really been here long enough to like I've heard from other homeowners that like the mortgage gets easier too as you're as like let's say the economy gets like inflation or something. um I guess that's beneficial from a homeowning perspective. It's not beneficial from any other perspective, but at least in that sense, like let's say your mortgage payment is like just here, like just what you can afford, but then like 15 years later, like what you bought it for is like a totally different game now, and the market's different, so the dollar's worth less. Well, now your like mortgage payment that was up here is like suddenly like whoosh, like way lower. um and so, in theory too, I haven't lived long enough to get there, but I remember somebody explaining that to me, like, and I think they were like one of those people who like lucked out and got a house in like Montrose, like back in the day, like when like it just, now it probably like multi-million-dollar house, but yeah, it's crazy. I think it'll help with that. Like, it also just gives like a little nest egg for like, you know, outside of like life insurance or something. Like that's an asset that like is a game changer, where it's like, if I pass away or something, like Mai has this like solid asset that she could, use to like either hold on to or sell and like make a little nest egg. And that's kind of cool too. Yeah. Nick, you said it way better than me because you probably understand finances a little more than I do. But you were saying it means you're locked into your current rate. Inflation goes up 2% a year, so your effective rate drops by 2% a year. That's a good point. Anyhow, it's so funny to get to this age where like, talking about mortgage payments is interesting. um, it's like a lot of things I used to get very bored hearing about. I suddenly find really fascinating. Like I talk about exercise all the time too now, and it's like I used to hate that. Okay, so now I need to focus on this thing. So Nick, what are you doing? What are you working on? All right. Nick said, I'm just doodling in Krita. I've been playing with it recently and it's gotten pretty close to Photoshop levels for quality. Huh. I don't know if I've heard of Krita. What is Krita? Is that on the iPad? So okay. Ooh, that makes it even more appealing. So Krita, is this a free Photoshop or something? Yeah, it's that is something I think about a lot because the creative suite is so great. I like it, and I'm used to it, and I'm used to the shortcuts on it, and I love the, having the full suite. I like After Effects a lot. I like, Illustrator is a really rough one to find a replacement for, because like they really do rock the vector market. And I need to have this be a non-talking head panel, so I'm gonna have it zoom out. So it's an open source digital painting software. That's awesome. Can it save things? Like, what kind of file formats can you save in? And I'm imagining it probably works in layers. But anyhow, so I find it really hard to like say that I'd like an alternative to Adobe, but the subscription model is really difficult with it. Where it's like it used to be that you kind of fork out hundreds of bucks like once every, maybe it might have even been like $400 or something, like, but it was like an expense you had to make like once every 3 or 4 years. So you could get like CS3 or CS2 or CS or whatever, and then CS2 would come out, and maybe you wait till CS3 to upgrade, and make that expense. But it's like it's become so much more problematic than that, where it yeah, it's just become harder. That's all. Because of the fact that the subscription fee, you're pretty much paying like way more than that like every single year. Um, and so that's kind of a bummer to lose that. The other thing that I've noticed too, um, I like that. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Where it's like I think the morality of it too would be would be an issue. Although I will say, um, I do like Adobe products. I do. I just don't like the. For me, I have an issue with the subscription models, and I have a real issue with. There's also like this thing they're doing now called like Adobe Sensei, where it's like it's doing like live data analysis of every Adobe user to automate what they're doing, and that I'm a little uncomfortable with. Um, I also have noticed, since it's gone to subscription models, you guys can let me know if I'm crazy on this, but it seems like the crashing on it is like, okay, so there's a couple things. Like, on a good note, if Adobe crashes, it has like a way better recovery thing than it ever did in the past. It's like way more similar to like InDesign in that sense, where InDesign just kind of is really good at like auto saving as you're working. Um, and I have noticed that improve, but I also have noticed that like it, I get Adobe crashes like way more often than I did when you just buy the suite. And I personally suspect it's because they're rolling out. I don't know. Maybe you guys have a thought on that, but I think it's because they're rolling out upgrades and stuff to the software like in real time without sort of doing their due diligence and like kind of testing it. But I will say, like for this stream, I'm using OBS, and I really enjoyed that open source software, and I have to say there's something really cool about free open source software. Um, yeah, in principle, it turns our workhorses into rentals. It becomes like a feudal system, totally, right? Like, and then the fact that it has to dial into the cloud before opening half the time also creates like this really just awkward model, um, where it's like if I can't even open the program when it's like not communicating, like what happens if you lose the internet? I'm sure there's a way to set it to not be like that, but um, there's a lot of frustrating things. I agree about Adobe. I will say though, I got a chance to go to Adobe Max a few years back, and that was a very cool experience. Um, and I would do it again. Yeah, publicly traded, having to put, yeah, Yeah, I like that. That's well put. Yeah, I feel like it's a weird thing. And like I think sometimes the profit motive is good. I tend to be sort of a capitalist myself. Like I'm definitely not like a pure socialist or anything. But I also do think there are some systems that it makes sense to socialize. I also think like um, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, where I think we're in a society that well, we're not in a society like society's full of all sorts of different things, but I have noticed like this weird culture, especially at the age that like I'm getting at, and I think we're all around the same age. Um, but it's like the idea of like this sort of sham society based on profit alone, and not just on a company level, but on a cultural level, where and this is one thing I do think is a problem in LA, where it's like one of the most common things to ask you hear asked in LA is like, "What do you make? Like, who do you work for?" you know. And I get it because I've fallen prey to that a little bit. Like, if I'm like interviewing somebody, for freelance or something like that, it's like it does matter like who you've worked for. Like, it does help to know like it. I don't know if you've worked in house for a larger company, or you've done freelance for like a larger company, it just means you can play ball. So I can see on a professional level why that's important. But that being said, like, it's just kind of a shame that we've gotten to a point where it feels like a lot of people only see value in profit. And so, like, it's like, yeah, I'd love to have like my book sell like a million copies, but I do think there's value in like, and I'm not only talking about my book, but I'm saying books like that. Like, I think books have value, whether they sell a lot or not. Um, I also think there's things that just have no monetary value, but should, I think about like my wife, right? And it's like you know, um, I mean, she freelances now and she's been doing a lot of kids books and stuff, which is cool. But for like the first 6 years of Ben's life, like she had to focus. She chose to kind of put her career aside, and even now, like does a ton of the like watches our son, and it's like that's a huge thing, and that's valuable for him, right? There's all these psychological studies about the value of that for children, having like a present family member like in their growing up around them, and like it's a lot of work, and it also has value to society because if we didn't raise him that way, then he'd be more kind of raised by like wherever we send him. And there's, like I said, I'm not against that, but it's like we did look at all these studies and stuff, and it does look like biologically and for your mental health and like the health of a kid, like it's really good to have one family member who's present in raising them. Um, and I know that's not possible for everybody, but my point is, it's kind of lame that that's not possible for everybody. It's kind of a sad thing that our society doesn't put any monetary value on that, um, because the payback for that in society is a really good one, right? Where it's like, um, yeah. Anyhow, it's just it's just kind of a good thing to kind of consider, right? Where it's like, what kind of things are we quantifying? And just because there's a dollar attached to it, does that mean as much as sort of like people who are making those dollars would like you to think it means? It's like I do think there's more there's more to life than just kind of like making a crap load of money. Which I'm like, if I'm talking to creatives, there I'm preaching to the choir. Um, oh, nice. That's cool. All right, Nick. Nick has a friend who's looking for freelance work. That's good, man. I hope you can find it. It's a rough time. It's a rough time right now for markets, man. It's a really rough time. I think most businesses right now are like pulling back on expenses and stuff. So I think, um, and especially in the sections that like I work in and art direct in, because it's like, yeah, I mean, like we rely on events and on different locations throughout the United States, and most travel locations are like closed, and most tourism is almost non-existent, and most small retail stores are like having to close every week. So it's been a really rough time, I think, in the market. It's just a weird era and time to navigate, man. I don't particularly wish to be in that position, you know. Although I could be, you know, who knows. Um, all right, so I'm almost done with this panel. Then I just have to finish that last row, and then should be good. Thanks for hanging with me and doing cool. Yeah. So yeah, this is a good point where he said there's a second order stuff people don't think through. I think one of the reasons we have an increase in shootings is kids don't have a parent home dedicated to raising them. Yeah, and I'm not saying like like we're lucky, like my wife and I are lucky to have that work, and it takes sacrifice to make it work, and we have to live in an area that's not like a fancy area because we have to like reduce our income to make it work. But it's like there is value to it, you know, and like that's what I mean by like the what you were mentioning. It's like that's kind of what I mean by like societal value, where it's like, hey, if you know this like actually raises like more psychologically grounded um, human beings that like are less prone to commit crime, less prone to violence, like tend to do better in school, tend to like have less psychological issues later on. Like, why would we not want to kind of reward that as a society, and or like encourage against it? Because it should be like, you know, really revered. Like, I think somebody who chooses to do that. I'm not saying everybody should choose to do that. I'm just saying if somebody makes that choice, it should be almost like viewed as like a good thing for the future of society and for people, you know, and like communities and stuff. Because we all come from somewhere, you know. Um, and I think there's just a lot of, why am I giving myself different shoes? I always wear Chucks in this book. Might have been because I was kind of tired of drawing Chucks. How could I get tired of drawing Chucks? They're like the best shoe. I actually need to get a new pair of Chuck Taylors. You know, speaking of like corporate stuff though, this is a weird thing. Like I'll wear Chucks occasionally, but if I have my choice, I try to do PF Flyers. For very similar reasons to why Nick, you were saying you don't like you know, like buying Adobe or whatever. Like if I can avoid buying like Nike stuff, I will. But even that's like a line you can't like perfectly avoid, you know, buying products that are, you know, made in fishy ways, because it kind of becomes this game of like whack-a-mole where you can't really crack down entirely on it. and you can unwittingly be like supporting a lot of bad companies. It's like a fine balance, but I think that's where it's like important to have things like what you were talking about, Nick, with different like open source software. If you don't like a certain software company, or like different options out there that can help you to have like a choice outside of it. This also doesn't look like I'm explaining. There we go. It also looks kind of angry, so and this kind of part, I know it's weird, but like for me at the thumbnail stage, working out kind of the acting too is really important. Nice. That's an awesome idea. It's funny too. I bought these like cheap knockoff Doc Martens, and the sole ripped off of them. And I was like, I mean, Docs are usually pretty badly built anyway, but it's like I in high school I wanted a pair of Docs really bad. Never had the money for them. So I saw this like knockoff pair, and I feel like the fact that they fell apart so quickly, they looked pretty convincing too. I wore them for like a good, like few months, and then they just completely collapsed, and I was like, oh man, that's what you get. but it was fun while it lasted, with those fake Docs. I might have to like maybe fork out for a real pair. The problem is though, yeah, I don't know. But I am kind of due for a new pair of shoes. That's one of the few things of anything that I'm actually kind of picky about. Like, I'm picky about my t-shirts kind of, but I'm not like I don't know. I think shoes are like the one thing where I like get kind of like I want to pay a decent amount of money so I have a pair that'll last a while. And I also really don't like when certain sneakers like the way they look. Okay. So they don't still do the lifetime guarantee. Okay. That's good to know. I love this. Just the idea of giving developers a fair shake and making sure it spurs competition is a good reason to use other programs too. I also like that, like where it's like I still like Wacom tablets, and like you'll see I don't have like a fancy tablet. I have one at work that's like a screen, and I'm just not used to it. Like I played with it for quite a while, and it just did not. It might have been my settings or something, but it just felt like kind of like it had this bugginess to it because it was like a reflection of the screen. I think drawing on an iPad might actually be better than that. But for me, like when I'm working digitally, I just ended up turning off the screen and just working like this because I'm used to it. But yeah, I wouldn't mind getting like a new pair of shoes because I've been wearing. Yeah, after those boots fell apart, I just kind of went to like a default pair of shoes that I don't wear very often. So I am due for a new pair of shoes. um, but yeah, I remember this one era in time. This is just on the shoe conversation. If you guys get bored with shoes, let me know. We can change the topic, but I'm interested in it. um, dude, I've heard that so much good stuff about that. Clip Studio, yeah, like my buddy Scott uses that a lot. I'm kind of curious. I think Corey uses that too. And I've seen it. Like it's funny. This is pre-COVID, everything getting shut down, but there was like this one day, because I've been going to these NCS meetings, like the National Cartoonist Society of LA, because I'm like a member and they have these meetings and like a bunch of cartoonists meet up. But there was like this one day where it feels like every single cartoon, well, not all of them, but it felt like it was all of them switched to the iPad Pro. It was just like night and day. It was almost like over a week where they all switched to an iPad Pro. Because of the functionality of that, and I know Clip Studio was a part of that. I also have heard really good things about like their inking brushes too. Is that true, Nick? That they have good inking brushes? All right, so back. I'm gonna get back on this business of talking about shoes. So like. There was this era in time. I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was like, I'm trying to think if it was, I think it was like the late 90s. No, it was early 2000s where it was really hard to find a pair of like flat sole skate shoes. And for some reason, skate stores, like skateboard shops and like companies that made like great like flat soled skate shoes, which are like the shoe, like you don't want a shoe that they started making like these space shoes, and like it was really irritating. It was like the worst to me. It was like the worst era of shoe purchasing where it was just like space shoes. Like they looked like you put on this like yeah, anyhow, they just looked like you put on like these moon boots or something, and like they had all these bells and whistles on it and stuff, and like the sole was like this weird like giant thing, and it was like, look, dude, I just need like a pair of like, and actually thinking about it, I think even Vans at that era like started doing these like weird forms like soles that like weren't flat, like they went like huge on the side, and they have these like crazy plastic molds, and it feels like we've gone back to an era where you can go to a skate shop, or I mean, you probably shouldn't buy shoes at a skate shop because they're always overpriced, but the point being, you can get a pair of flat soled skate shoes again, and they're not hard to find. Partially because like the internet's way bigger than it was then, but I still, sorry for the rant on that. But so Nick confirmed that about the brush engine. So yeah, apparently Clip Studio has a good. That's what I hear too, Chris. I'm curious. I don't know. I mean, 4 years ago, I could have gone on to. I think I actually forgot to mention this, but I think, Nick, were you the one who, like a stream ago or something to that extent, were recommending that I do Twitch? I think it was you who mentioned that, but I could be wrong. If it was you, I wanted to say thank you, and I'm trying it out tonight. So this stream is going live on Twitch and on YouTube, and then we'll see how that goes, because I literally have no followers at all on Twitch, so it's a little intimidating, but I'm also really excited about it because yeah, I mean, I've been meaning to do it. If that wasn't you who recommended Twitch, then I am sorry. But I feel like it was. Let me know if I'm wrong on that. But anyhow, so I'm trying out Twitch with this, and the reason I bring that up is, yeah, it was you. Okay, cool. Thank you, Nick. I'm like, I felt like I owed you a thank you for suggesting that, because I'm going to try it out and see how it goes, and then try to figure out that format, because it's a lot different than the way YouTube runs, but it definitely looks like something that is user friendly, and I'll figure out. But I appreciate that comment, because it kind of made me finally just go like, yeah, okay, I'll set up an account. Like, especially because the software I'm using to stream this like streams to both, so it's not like a crazy learning curve or ask. But But Twitch is a really good example of like my mindset on most things. Like I joined Facebook like very late. I was very stubborn about not wanting to have a Facebook account. I still barely use my Twitter account. You know, like I'm somebody who I learn things when I need to, and or when I'm like insanely curious. But other than that, like it's really hard. No way. Okay, this is cool. So Chris is Sketch Boy in Twitch, which is kind of rad. And I was you just answered a huge question for me, Chris, because I was wondering if it would if it would stream to both, and I thought that was really cool. Yeah, yeah, Nick, I agree. I think that's a good idea to kind of sit and reassess a little bit. One of the tough things, you know, and this is not meant as an excuse or anything like that, but there's certain things that I could do to brand my work that were I completely reliant on freelance again, would be more possible because I'd have like not that you have more time, but it's like you do kind of have more time because like half the job, at least when I was freelance, like half the job is marketing. um, and so you kind of have to allocate time for that because it's what keeps your business growing and stuff like that. For me, one of the things that's really hard to kind of juggle now is trying to find methods of marketing that aren't massive time sinks. Because I do have like a day gig as an AD, and like I need to make sure I don't suck at it. You know, like I have to actually focus on that job. And then also I'm like constantly right now I'm like in the thick of like trying to get this comic out and promote the comic. And I was doing really well with that for about a month or two. Um, but yeah, I definitely would agree there could be a better marketing. I like also the idea of a dedicated channel for 48-hour art check or art casters too. That's a good suggestion. The catch is if we did that, I'd have to get Scott on board and Corey on board. Corey hosts the 48-hour art check, and then Scott also hosts art casters. So, and I do think Scott was mentioning like he has the advantage of he has a much larger follower count, so he gets quite a few views more when he hosts it on his channel. So I don't know. I'm curious if you'd be open for it, but I like the idea of having it branded. Yeah, I agree. But for me, that is actually one of the reasons I'm going to be doing these live streams, because I realized, at least for myself, I really enjoy, and I'm glad you had brought up Twitch on the last thumbnail, because I really enjoy watching Twitch streams lately. And there's a couple that are like gamers, but they just kind of talk like about life, and they're pretty open ended. But there's something fascinating about sort of the visual of them working towards a goal on a video game and then the conversation. And so I was realizing like I'm working on these comics anyway. So I'm going to be putting in this time anyway. And so this is a way to, like, outside of just marketing and stuff like that, like hang out, which I think is cool. But then aside from that, this is also a way to generate content that's sustainable and can hopefully build my brand a little bit on my own YouTube channel, and Twitter and stuff like that. So that hopefully, in theory, I can kind of push more of these two stories books. But I think this is really good advice, Nick, that you're making. I think that's also hilarious. Chris, I appreciate that you went to Twitter. I mean, not to Twitter, to Twitch to kind of check that out. And now I can confirm that if someone's watching from Twitch and they chime in on the chats, I can comment on that and on YouTube comments simultaneously. So very exciting. I knew it. It's funny. My body internally knows when it's about an hour. So I think I'm going to do probably like another half an hour because I still have like Nick, don't be too concerned. I'm not going to burn out. I did have a nap. So I think what I'll do is before even doing this, I'm going to take like a 20-second break, which I try to do at around every hour. So that I also don't burn out on the stream, and also so I'm a little more interesting, because if I just burn through it for like 3 hours or something and don't stop to have like a little break, I even need to get a refresher, it'll get dull. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish for those of you who aren't in the chats too. I'm about 2/3 through this page, and I think we'll get it finished. But a lot of good thoughts about like Clip Studio, about I don't know, I find it really fascinating, and it's fun hanging out with you guys in the wee hours. All right, I'll be right back, and I shall see you guys soon. All right, Chris is in. Are you still kind of Garden Grove HB area, Chris? Let's see here. So I think fairly close. Yeah, one thing I was thinking about when it comes to marketing is I also think it's going to be really fascinating for people who might be working on their own comics or just interested in process to just kind of see the tedium of doing this this thing, but also like see like a breakdown and maybe see like because I have another graphic novel in the can that I might try to pitch and get published if I don't get this finished in like a year and a half. I might put that out just so it creates this like illusion of putting out, constant work. That's in my head. I don't know if that'll work, but I do think it's reasonable. But the thing that I think this channel and this show can function as too is like showing people that right. So Nick said he used to live in HB and he misses being able to go to Art Supply Warehouse near there. Yep, my wife worked at Art Supply Warehouse for like quite a while. It's a really good art store and actually a pretty cool place to work. But yeah, I love Art Supply Warehouse. I miss that place. And actually, it's funny. My wife's sister still works there, so good times. Let's see here. But yeah, so for anybody who's not familiar with Orange County, Art Supply Warehouse is like this mom and pop place. Nick used to work at Art Supply. Okay, weird. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of people I know who used to work at Art Supply Warehouse, Nick. There's probably not that many. Yeah, like so Chris used to work there. Boom. Right. It's a good store. And I feel like there is something kind of fun about the way they run things. Because people who work there don't usually like leaving working there. And it's usually just a financial decision, which I think is a sign of like good management. that people kind of feel home there. So yeah, so then Chris is mentioning he met his wife there. So there you go. Isn't it a small world? It's so weird. Um, yeah, and Nick, like Chris and I went to Cal State Long Beach too, so it's like that's kind of our old haunting grounds. Like that whole area. It's funny too. Speaking of California, so I miss some people I knew in Portland, and when we lived there, like I don't miss it, but like out of anywhere I've lived in my life, and my wife as well, like we constantly miss Long Beach and our crew that are now scattered. Like a lot of them are all over the place. Not all of them are centralized in Chris's area, but a lot of my friends from art school are still in that area, and I really miss living there because it was nice to be able to. I don't know. There's just something about like that Long Beach. Um, some sides of HB are hideous. I don't miss. I have a really funny story about HB that kind of describes the parts of HB I didn't like, but in general. But my point is like, I actually get homesick for Long Beach, like all the time. Like I really love that city. Anytime I go there to visit, I'm like, it's just one of the few places where I'm like, this is home. Like, it's weird. My son was born near there. It's kind of awesome. Yeah. Nick, HB is weird. There are nice aspects, but it's an odd place. So I grew up in LA County. So there was like a culture shock when I moved there. And then when I first moved there, the first time I lived there was like early in college. And actually Chris knew me then, but I had this apartment on like 13th and Orange or something. And it was like right, like a walk away from Main Street and all the bars and stuff. And then like you could walk for like 10 minutes and you'd be at the beach. It was a really cool apartment, but we shared it with like 5 guys, like just to afford rent. And that was like early, like before I got in the BFA program. And then during, I think that before I moved to Long Beach. And yeah, so I used to go down there. Actually, I just realized I need to be continued. I will tell my horror story and culture shock story in a second. Okay. Because I do have to block out this next bit of type. Okay. Oh, that's right. I forget. See, this is why thumbnails are so good. So at this point, I had brought in CK, or dog. So my wife and I have a pug who's now like an old man, but at this time was like maybe 1 in this apartment. But I do need to indicate that he's here. My pugs are actually a character in the story. Yeah, 1 pug who's still here and still kind of hanging. Okay, it's good I paused on the HB thing. Okay, let me get to that HB tale. So I moved there and I'm like, this is just beautiful. It's insane. But like the people there were like these weird, because I grew up kind of poor. And that particular part of Huntington was just like a bunch of spoiled rich kids. That was weird. Like that was like a total culture shock for me. Where it was like, what are these people? Like they're really shallow and and like there's a ton of people who are like very right wing and not like thinking. Like I know some people who lean right politically that at least have like thought. But yeah. Anyhow, so I go to I remember because I at this time I was like I was a young man. I had just moved from this small town that I now live in again, but I had just moved and was like really excited because it was like, this possibility. It was the second apartment I had. So like my first year I was living in Long Beach, shared an apartment, and then second year at Cal State Long Beach I moved to Huntington, I think. So anyhow, like I'm kind of excited about like I'm by the beach. This is cool, that kind of thing. And I'm a young man, so I'm like I'm gonna go to these bars. And I remember one night I'm like I'm just gonna go to a bar and like kind of on Main Street and get a drink. And I remember going to the bar and getting a drink and sitting down, ordering a drink. All I'm doing is walking in there and looking at the bartender. And I remember this girl walked from across the room up to me and was like, I have a boyfriend. I'm not interested in you. Like this weird like I wasn't even near or looking or anything. They just made this assumption. I don't know, it was the weirdest experience. And it was like this plastic, just really fake woman. And then like there were all these like weird, like jock type guys, like really like, I don't know, I guess they're called Chads now. Like, so it, it felt like, um, it felt like the home of Chad. Um, I don't know if that makes sense, but it was just like, it was not an area for me in that sense. But then from Cal State Long Beach, I met like so many good people who lived in Huntington. My wife grew up in Huntington too. So it's like, um, not everybody's terrible. But I just didn't like, I never was really exposed to that. Also, I remember people calling me bra, and that was really weird. Or I was like, I'm from LA County. So I don't tend to like when people call me bro, but it's at least I can understand that. I don't know. It was a weird time, but that part I don't miss. I don't miss the whole like frat and sorority vibe to like a whole section of it. I don't miss the really like I also taught at Laguna College of Art and Design for a bit, and that area is like a mix, right? You have some really great people, but it's like there's something about that side of the coast that also has like a lot of kids who grew up with like way too much money and have been just like entitled their whole lives and lean like really far right and like their worries are not, I don't know, I kind of don't want to go too into it, but yeah, that was the part that I didn't like. But like I said, through Cal State Long Beach I met so many cool people who live there. um, and there is like a great part of it too, so it depends. um yeah. I like it. You moved there from Boston. Well, that's great because like with a Boston vibe, like yeah, that was kind of my issue too, where I was like, I had literally when I moved there, it was like from like literally like the ghetto in Long Beach. So I was like, come on, dude, like, you're not. This isn't. I don't know. It's just a weird. It's a weird area. Long Beach is nice, and I think San Pedro is way underrated. Yeah, I could see that. I definitely like Long Beach a lot, but I also think I like Long Beach mostly because of the group of friends we had in that area, and not all of them lived in Long Beach. It was kind of scattered somewhere in Orange County. I definitely would say like the side of HB that I think I like tends to be a little more on the side that starts getting more towards Westminster. Um, and then that's, I don't know, but yeah. And I mean, it is nice. Like the pier is nice, it's the ocean's pretty amazing. I like that stretch of ocean where you can do bonfires like midway. Um, Nice. Yeah. Isn't it weird when you live right next to somewhere? Like I was just thinking about this the other day. We lived by the ocean, um, and we never went to the ocean. Like my wife and I. I feel like it's like that out here too, where we're in the Antelope Valley. And I see people who like travel to like go to the desert to kind of check out like Joshua trees and stuff like that. And I'm like, we're right here. There's a lot of stuff like that out here. And you get kind of used to where you live and sort of forget the cool stuff till you have friends visit or something. And then you're like, oh, I got to take them to all these cool places that like I never go to outside of that. I don't know. Okay. Focusing on this type real quick. But Nick, that's so funny. Like, who knew? Yeah, there you go. Chris K starts getting into stereotypical, the OC vibes. That's a perfect. See, I did like a 20-minute rant about it, and you described it in a sentence. That's exactly the part of Orange County I don't like. um, I love the Huntington Beach Library. But like the dichotomy of my love and hate for that area is perfectly described by like driving to the Huntington Beach Library, because my wife and I like to walk the dogs around the park there. It's just, I mean, it's just a beautiful, um, it's a nice park. It's a really cool library. And when you're driving there, though, you have to drive past this oil rig. Like, we were visiting family, like, I think it was like last year or something. And we drive past this, like, it's an oil rig museum. Like, it's like the Museum of Oil or something. I've never been in it, but it's like the most militantly, like, far right place you can imagine. And you can tell just from driving past it. So, they had painted like these giant Donald Trump faces on like the side of the oil rig that like raises up and down, and they had MAGA stuff everywhere, and it had like just a bunch of stuff. Keep in mind, I'm also saying this about Orange County, so that's like right next to this beautiful Huntington Beach Library, which is like one of my favorite places. So it was like this dichotomy of just like two different Orange counties. Very fascinating. But I do think like Orange County gets a bad rap sometimes, for some of the stuff I'm saying. But like, you know, people will kind of miss all the cool culture that's around there too. Really good food too, and I miss TK Burger a lot. I know that's like just like a chain. No, I don't think that is a chain, but that's a really good hamburger. I don't even know if that's around there anymore, because the last few times I've been there, it just this is the weird thing about getting older too. I wonder if this happened to you, Chris, too. But like the last time I went to Cal State Long Beach campus, I was like, whoa, there's like, it just looked different. The giant donut was like in a different spot. Like all this stuff that I remembered was like different, which I'm imagining must happen like as you get older. Like you have memories of buildings that aren't even there, or they were there, but like now they're like a foot away. Or giant donuts that were like, that was on the roof, now it's like on the side. I don't know. Anyhow, I was a little weirded out by that the last time, but it was a really good feeling. Okay, let me write this. I keep trying to write the sentence and then getting distracted. Okay. Urged. That's crazy though. Like, this is one of the things I think is so fun about dialogue, because who would have known uh, that we all were from around the same area? So, while I was saying that about that museum, it's like the AV is like that too, though. Like Lancaster is actually a pretty nice place to live where I live. Um, and there's a bunch of cool stuff out here. I've been surprised by it. And there used to not be. Like when I grew up here, it was just like dead for any culture. Um, you know, there weren't even skate parks or anything like that. And now they have like some pretty decent microbreweries. They have an art museum. They have like a little more culture to it. Um, but the biggest appeal here is cost of living, and the fact that like pretty good school districts on certain sides. And yeah, I mean, like it's one of the few places where you can have like kind of a suburban type home and like not, um, have to take out like 20,000 loans and work 10 jobs to kind of keep a roof over your head. But then you pay for that with commutes, which is part of why I have to come up with clever ways to do all this extra stuff. I do wonder sometimes, though, because in my head, sometimes I'm like, I think my commute kind of takes away like a window of creative time. But I actually kind of wonder because I think one nice thing about commuting is, especially as a parent, it's like you need like this moment of quiet where you can process and kind of think through things. And I've noticed this like when people get home from work, usually they want to sit for a second, or process or whatever. Um, and in theory, I can kind of like get a lot of that quiet processing time out of my way on the. Oh, nice. So Nick does an art meetup in LA called Sip and Sketch. That's cool. Chris does the drink and draw too, I think, in LA, and he's taken. We've done a couple. Jan, dude. All right. Yan, another great, really good illustrator and artist coming to us. I enjoyed those commute videos too. And I was realizing like I wanted to make them again. And that's part of why I'm doing this live stream. Because I just realized to make my second book, the editing time pulls away from my productivity and ability to actually make comics. So I like that's part of why I'm like, so when's the time that I can kind of create content and talk about art and talk about life and stuff that doesn't require me to lose like productivity and lose time that is really essential for getting this second book down. So that's where I was like, dude, I'm going to do this. What are you up to, Jan? Are you working on some comics? Jan also has a really good YouTube channel, and yeah, I mean, you guys should check that out. Let's see. Okay. I am starting to get more focused here. I think this is actually a very good spot to get into it. And then I gotta just look at, let's see. Look up some reference here. Oh, brutal. Yeah, how is the pandemic where you're at, and where are you at now, by the way? Because like it's had so many different effects all over the world. For us, like especially in California, it's been like extremely bad, like the amount of spread. And I think it's finally started to flatten out, but they just released the regulations on it. So my worry is like now everybody's going to go out and party and it'll just everything will have to lock down again. Nice. My shiny new iPad and Procreate are pulling back. How do you like Procreate, Jan? I'm curious. We were just talking about Nick was talking about, oh my gosh, I have to scroll up. The other nice thing about these chats is I can like go, what was that? What was that program you mentioned? And the cool thing is I can look in the chats and go, oh, there it is. But anyhow, Nick, I got to get back to my comics, but Nick was mentioning some open source platforms and stuff. Yeah, that's what I thought, because I was gonna announce that you were calling from Spain, and then you moved to the Philippines. Yeah, that's crazy. So, how are the lockdowns there? Are they like really enforced? Like, I'm just curious. Like, how's the government handling it? How are you handling it? Oh, that was it. Clip paint and Krita. Thank you. Thank you, Nick. I'm gonna actually write that down too. I just heard about an open source 3D program that I wrote about too. I think it was open source. But for anyone who's interested, I asked my friend David Chelsea, who's a really cool, he's just like one of my favorite cartoonists. He does all those perspective books for comics and stuff like that. But he also did one of my favorite memoirs ever done. That's hard to track down, but you can track it down. It's out of print, but it's called David Chelsea in Love. And then he's done like 4 other graphic novels, and he kind of invented or perfected the 24-hour comic. But anyhow, he was telling me about that because he's working with like 3D sculpting, and he was telling me about this new 3D program, and I wrote it down because I always forget that he's like building like Sean Connery heads in and stuff. It's really going to be cool. So we're going to have him on Artcasters tomorrow, which I'm pretty excited about because I haven't talked to that guy in a while, and I admire him. And used to hang out with him a bit in Portland. Just a really good dude. That's so funny. So Chris worked like a year or so after, and then Nick worked a little bit before that. I'm sure there's got to be overlap in our communities then, Nick, though. I'm fairly sure of it. So let's see here. But anyhow, I'm excited about having him on, and that should be a fun discussion. Where I think we're going to talk a little bit about memoir and crafting that. And then I also want to talk about like the cool stuff he's doing with 3D modeling. Let's see here. So I got to figure out, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do here. I'm looking at townhomes while we're talking in HB because there's a certain look, and that is it. There it is. Okay. There's a certain look I was looking for, and I wanted to make sure I'm getting it because there's like a certain kind of look to a lot of the townhomes in Huntington. Okay. Except that it wouldn't make sense to have this because I'm going to need an establishing shot later. Crap. Okay. Never mind. Still good I did that. That'll come in handy. Okay. So now we're just going to have, I think I need to kind of introduce Jeremy in this. No, you know what? I am going to establish sorry, this was me thinking out loud. So I have to kind of establish a location. This is a rule of comics that I have broken in the past, and I've been really trying to be cognizant of it in two stories. And if I break it, please let me know. Um, Once you've read it, like if you notice a spot where I didn't really follow this rule, I'd like to hear it. I mean, it'd be hard to change now that it's in print, but anyhow, so the general premise is like when you're doing a sequential story and you change location, you want an establishing shot every single time, which I don't think is like that big of news for most people. But generally, if you like just kind of change locations, showing an interior, you can do that in ways that indicate scene, or you can do that for effects to like jar people and kind of make them feel a little weird. But in general, um, it's the general rule that you can sometimes break, is that you should show the location first, because it helps people establish. So originally I was like, okay, I'm going to do this as like a townhouse. Um, and then I was like, no, I'm not, because I'm going to show the establishing shot later. But I realized actually it would be good to plant a different angle of it, because I think the establishing shot will be an overhead of the well, it's not really an apartment, it's a townhome. And so by having like this overhead established um, later on, that allows me to bring in an establishing shot. And that also serves a different purpose, which is I don't want to bring it. I'm mentioning my friend Jeremy here with like a phone call with him, and I've kind of introduced this guy Troy, but I don't want to bring Jeremy in to it yet. Like I actually want the reader to kind of meet my friend Jeremy when I go to Jeremy's house in the story. So it's like so it serves two purposes, because that leaves a little bit of mystery about Jeremy. It leaves a little bit of interest about meeting a new character, and also I think it keeps it from becoming a bunch of talking heads too, which we talked about at the top. So it's like a win-win-win. These are the weird thoughts that I think when I'm doing thumbnails. And sometimes I wonder if I overthink these things, because it's not like, I mean, I do inventive paneling somewhat, but I don't tend to do like really crazy panels. Like I do dynamic paneling in different ways, but I don't do like McFarlane kind of panels, like where things get kind of wobbly and fluid. I tend to stick to a grid, and there's a reason for that too. But anyhow, I do put in a lot of thought to what goes on with that grid, and then how I break that grid when I do. Um, and I think I've explained that at the top too, where it's like I've stuck more to a grid on the last two sections of this story. Which, by the way, you guys can check this out if you do Instagram or anything like that. I post the finished thumbnails on my Instagram, and so that's so people can kind of read along as I go. And then it also keeps me accountable to make sure that I'm trying to post a page every day, which yesterday I broke that, but in general I try to do a page a day. So but anyhow, you can see that it becomes way more gridded off when it starts getting into a certain narrative that takes place in Long Beach. And I got into that a little bit on yesterday's stream, which you can check out on YouTube, not on Twitch, but all preceding times I stream should be on Twitch as well. I love this. Film and comics share so much visual language. Yeah, there's two things that were really fascinating I read in the chats. One was Nick saying it was so long ago I forget most of the names, and that's interesting. Like you guys were just talking about like certain potential coworkers from where you both used to mutually work at similar places at the same place, and that reminds me that like that's been one of the fascinating things from writing memoir, like, and trying to be really accurate and truthful. It is amazing how much crap you forget. At least for me, it's been really amazing. Um, like even this sequence, this character Troy. This was a guy I hung out with a few times, um, and then just kind of was there at this like very weird, very high tension situation that I'm now writing about many years after the fact. And I had to actually call this guy, Jeremy, who I'm writing about here, to confirm that that was him, because I was a little uncertain. I was like, was that guy's name Troy? And I know that sounds terrible, but it's like, yeah, when it's been like, I mean, the events in here are easily 10 years old, at least like a decade old. So it's like when it's been a decade, things get a little fuzzy, and that kind of puts the onus on I think if you're writing memoir and you're really trying to stick to truth, like that puts the onus on you to really ask people and do your due diligence to like really think through it and remember. And that's been fascinating, just how many little details you forget, and how regardless you're probably going to get some of it wrong. um, that's just been mystifying to me and fascinating. So Library of Congress, I didn't because it's the publisher handles that. So I don't know if that makes sense. Like the second it was published, I think it went to that, I believe. I think. I don't know. I could be wrong. Now I feel bad. I was all confident, and that might be one I'm wrong about. It's not a bad idea, though. I have a friend who I shouldn't say friend, I should say acquaintance, but an acquaintance from Portland who I used to go for beers with occasionally, and he's a pretty talented cartoonist in his own right. But during the runoffs in Georgia, um, where they were trying to kind of like anybody who's on my side of the political spectrum was probably paying a lot of attention. Actually, everybody was paying attention, if they're paying attention to any side of the political spectrum, to Georgia. But anyhow, my friend, my acquaintance, did these really cool postcards that he mailed to citizens of Georgia. They were like these hand screen printed postcards, and they were basically like trying to encourage people to get out and vote. Um, and they're beautiful. And what was cool was he actually ended up getting contacted um, after by the Library of Congress, and they were like, "We want copies of that. Can you send us copies so we can catalog these postcards?" We saw some of them on social media or something, and that was really cool. I was like, "How often does that happen? Where you do something with your art where the Library of Congress calls you?" I thought that was interesting. Uh, I hope so, man. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, I've been fascinated by the whole memory thing, and that's been like a real interesting exercise with with doing memoir is like you really realize like how somewhat fragile um how fragile our minds are and how vulnerable we are to faulty memories. um and then what's weird too is like some of the stuff that I've been writing about um did happen, and it's just so absurd to think back. Like writing this whole sequence with my neighbor, it was like I was really visualizing like that whole thing occurring, and it was just the most absurd thing as I was sketching it out. I was like, and even writing it, I was just like, this is the weirdest, like strangest situation. Like it's a very, I mean, there was a guy talking to his computer that was turned off and like thought it was talking to him. Like that happened, but it's like, I don't know. There's just some stuff. So that's been interesting too about memoir, where there's some stuff that's like so absurd that happens in reality that it almost like makes fiction seem realistic. Even like you think of the last year, if somebody's writing a memoir taking place then, which actually I hope some people do because that's amazing material. Like everything's locked down. It's literally, I mean, you don't have to write a post-apocalypse story. You can literally write like a pandemic story now, like, and from like really weird perspectives, where it's like if somebody's writing like a post-apocalyptic story, they usually aren't going to pick like a character who's like stuck at home in an apartment or something, trying to navigate like relationships like in a lockdown society or something. Like you wouldn't think to like kind of do the slice of life in that setting. And I think that's going to be really fascinating to read some of the work that comes out of this. But if you think about it, like if you wrote about 2020, just the events like in our country, and then like Jan like must be experiencing it like crazy because it's just like I mean it's all over the world. No, I don't think a lot of people would have believed the story, even the like, yeah, it's just been interesting. Even the act of remembering changes how well you think you remember them, like quantum mechanics observer effect. Totally, right? So yeah, and that's one of the reasons I have to check myself when I'm writing these things too. I usually have friends who went through it, or who were there to kind of confirm it. What's been interesting too is like I had a couple drafts where I inserted someone from a different time into a timeline that was like a week later or weeks later with a conversation that happened, but it was in a different frame of time. And that got caught by like a friend of mine. And I was like, oh crap, I like like I threw this person into this situation who wasn't there, but in my head I remembered that conversation I was having with them, so they were there anyhow. So it's been a real good exercise of like checking my memory and like checking my memory with people I know and stuff. And I actually would recommend that for people too, even if you're not writing memoir or something. Like occasionally talk to friends about what you remember, because you might be surprised by like how wrong you are. It's interesting. I'm excited. I think this is going to get there. Okay, so I got that down. Okay, this is good. This is going to be. This actually, I'm going to break into two panels. Oh, perfect. Okay, and one of them is going to be short because this is an actual slightly action sequence. Finally, we have broken the endless phone conversation sequence that's lasted 4 pages. I think social media destroyed heroes, which led to the superhero boom. I wonder what the chaos of 2020 is going to bring out in art. And then Chris was mentioning we're living in history. These are totally true. I don't know about this one though, because I think there's I think 2020 might have killed memoir for a little bit, because it's like I think my book, like I want people to read it, and I actually think it's important, like especially at this time, because it's about like mental illness and sort of overcoming that, um, overcoming some pretty serious like bouts of depression, and then living with depression and stuff. And it deals with like panic disorder and sort of letting people know they're not alone. But and so I think it's important that memoir and like kind of more true to life stuff is out there right now. But I do think there's a part of us that's like so like just collectively, when I say us as a society, that's so overloaded with with just like the desire to get out of this. Like it's such a drag. Like I mean, things are potentially on an up curve, but I feel like the news and sort of the happenings, and then like I think people's kind of awareness of death, a lot of these things are like on hyperdrive, and so like most people are probably not like I'm gonna read like a really heavy dark book right now. So in a weird way, I think it might actually lead to like an uptake in like escapist literature and stuff, because I think people may not want to focus on like dark stuff right now because it's already pretty heavy. So it's a mix. It'll be interesting, but I do think if anybody's writing like memoirs right now, it's going to be really weird. Like 5 years from now, seeing like, can you imagine like a 14-year-old's like memory of right now? That baffles me. That's one thing I'm thankful for, is that I'm not like in my early teens or late teens. Because I think for a teenager right now, this must be like, I don't know. My son's been, my son's like 7, so um, yeah, that's a fair point. It's gonna be like, yeah, it'll be like stuff about really good leaders or communities pulling together. That's true. Maybe people will just want to watch like these very like one layer, propaganda pieces. Um, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's been interesting. I There is a part of me that feels like we've always been living in history, but there's definitely something unique about this time, um, that I think will supersede a lot of the years. I do feel like it's very much like some of the crap my grandpa talked about. Who was like he went through the Great Depression, served in World War II and stuff, and like saw some pretty crazy stuff. But like I think our lifetimes are actually going to be more kind of a mirror of that than they were of the generation after. And that's really weird to be living through. We're going to appreciate casually just being around people. Yeah, dude. There's a lot of stuff I've heard recently predicting that it might be like the 1920s, where it's, like after the plague, everybody just parties. um, I do feel like as an artist, though, it's hard to get a proper perspective on what the rest of the world is going through. Because, like I said, this little 2-hour session we're doing, like, this is what I do. Like, I do art really weird times of night. And it's a lot of the times it's like you and a computer, um, or you and like a page or whatever. Um, and I feel like most artists are pretty conditioned for that. So even though we're having a little bit of a head trip about it, because I think we're social animals anyway. So even if you're an introvert, there's still like this desire to be in a pack. Like there's still this like social need. Um, And so having a complete absence of that is pretty rough, on most people. But I do feel like artists are like it's hard for, at least for me, it's hard for me to understand what like somebody who doesn't do projects, like their own projects, is going through, because I'm like, this must be like, I mean, this must be hell for people who don't know what it's like to like sit in isolation and work, you know. So I feel like my point is, guys, like as artists, we've been training for this moment our whole lives. now we're now we're the super adapted, like prepped for this moment kind of guys. Briefly, I don't know, because I do feel like I am handling it. There's things I don't like about it, but I've been handling it okay. And part of it is that, like, if I have windows of time, I'm not like, oh, what am I going to do with myself right now? I'm kind of like, this is great stuff. Yeah, I agree with that too from Chris. Yeah. Let's see. So we have like okay, let's see here. I've got okay, that's good. Trying to work this out. Yeah, Chris, you're right. Escapist stuff always works, but I do feel like the and I think the superhero thing was on the rise, but I do kind of feel like I don't see that decreasing at a time like this. I'm kind of curious though. Like I should look into this. I wonder what. Sorry, I just saw Chris's comment. Um, ooh, um, Chris, future kid, Grandpa, why are you always hoarding toilet paper? Also, future kid is going to be wondering why we're all OCD and like wiping everything down, and we're like, if somebody breathes near us, we're kind of like, mm. We're going to be like extra picky about how people sneeze and like touching doorknobs, and just, yeah, there's going to be some really weird fallout from this that I think the younger generation might just be like, what is your problem? It'll be kind of equivalent to like my grandma, habitually just saved oil, like cooking oil, old reused cooking oil, and a lot of fat. Like she would just save it. And some of that was like, yeah, it can be reused, but some of that was also because they used to save that stuff for like materials for the war, like, so it's like this is weird, fall back and roll out from that. So I don't know, who knows. Okay, Nick, you were talking about 16 ways to defend a walled city. What is that? Explain it. I'm curious. Okay. And I grabbed. Okay. Okay, cool. Finally, a little bit of action. Hey, Peter, good morning. Welcome. We were just talking about the fallout and how interesting stories are going to be from this era in time. And then Nick was going to tell us a little bit about the 16 ways to defend a walled city, which sounds pretty interesting. And then Chris, yeah, I was also kind of joking that we are strangely as creatives like more adapted to this crazy isolation chamber we're all in. um, and Chris was saying he's glad about that. And that's basically where we're at. What you working on, Peter? Peter works on his comics in the mornings, which I think is really cool. I envy that. I usually work on all my creative stuff like super late at night. Ooh, okay. See, fantasy sci-fi ish book sounds pretty appealing to me, Nick. Um, I just went through the whole. I'm probably gonna butcher the name, but it's like the whole Lightbringer Chronicles, the Sanderson series, because Corey Kerr got me into those. And they were like super heavy, but awesome. Netflix used to come in the mail. It did in red envelopes. Whatever, Dad. Yeah, whatever, Grandpa. Um, it's about a siege. Oof, that sounds fun. Okay. I need a good sci-fi. I might have to add that after I'm done with this like weird philosophical book I've been reading. And then I also have um I hope they have is it an audiobook, Nick? If they have an audiobook of it, I probably will jump on that business. And then Peter was saying working on getting some coffee, jumping on some inks, got a cover to finish for a client. Yep. I got 2 panels to finish. Uh, and we're creeping towards the 3 hour mark, so I might be going a little longer. I need to draw this part though, so okay. So they're going to be running, and I want it to be kind of like scooping up. Okay, scooping up the dog. Boom. Dog's head's going to be there. Swoop. Want it to be like bop. Okay, and then this is going to be kind of setting up the next shot with a little bit of, might be awkward, I know. I think that composition might be cool though. Cool. That's awesome, Nick. So I might have to check that out on Audible. Um, you write that down. The Walled 16 Ways. Is it a series or just a single one? I hear you, Nick. I am a bit of an insomniac too, so it's nice to have people to chat with. I actually have to keep it in check, like my insomnia. Um, and it's weird because it's like I don't know if it's insomnia or just I don't know. Chris Cowgie has known me long enough to where he probably could say whether I'm an insomniac or not, but I'm definitely a night owl. Um, and then I've kind of adjusted and slowly gotten used to normal ish hours, whatever people call that, partially from being an art director and working in house. But there's a soul in me that likes to be a vampire, basically. Like, not a literal vampire, but vampire hours. So, yeah. I have to qualify not a literal vampire because there's some pretty weird conspiracy people out there. Let's see here. So, I think that there's another one. Okay. So there is another book possibly, but it's not in the same world or series. Okay, I'm excited. I'm gonna have to check that out. So I do like good sci-fi. I was way heavy into sci-fi when I was a kid. I used to have let me see, what were my go-to science fiction books. So the first major science fiction I read was Lord of the Rings when I was pretty young. read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and was like, this is cool. Like, which it is a really good book. But then from there, like, you look and you're like, after you read Lord of the Rings, it's like the closest thing you're going to get to after that is like, oh, maybe the Silmarillion. And then you start reading the Silmarillion, it's not as well structured. I don't know. Some people like the Silmarillion, but it kind of reads as what it was, which was C.S. Lewis's like kind of working out Lord of the Rings. Or did I say Lewis? Man, it's late. Tolkien's working out Lord of the Rings. So then you have like that's a bad expression. Okay. So then but I used to like, there was a used bookstore close to my house where I would just peruse the fantasy sections, and often I'd just buy a book cover based on the art because there was really cool fantasy art. But I was like really into like Piers Anthony. Piers Anthony had this whole series called like they were like these Xanth books. And I still have them on my shelf and stuff. I've been meaning to reread them because they were really fun when you're in like junior high, like early junior high, late elementary school, to like read these books that I think were really written with junior high kids in mind. I do remember like some really cool storylines from those two. Like there was a kid who had a tapestry that he could enter into the tapestry and then become this like fantasy character. But then like one of the main characters in the story ends up being like a spider that's crawling on the tapestry. It ends up being like this giant spider who he befriends. And he's like this powerful barbarian in this like fantasy, but then in real life, he's just like this nerdy kid. But there's a lot of humor in those books from what I remember. And it's been a long time since I've read them. And I have been meaning to do that for years, like to reread those and see if they hold up. Nick was asking, was he the punny one? For sure, dude. Like he based like his maps around like the areas he lived in. So it's like basically like a map of Florida. And then there's a ton of puns and like what he named characters, and it's just very silly. But anyhow, I was really into that. And then I used to read Anne McCaffrey books all the time. I was like really into like the Dragon Riders of Pern, and anyhow. So that's on the fantasy end. I was a nerdy kid. I was heavy into fantasy, and then I kind of fell out of it for a bit. I did love like George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff I like that's fantasy, but I had kind of fallen away from fantasy for a bit, and then just like really recently, like I said, those Sanderson books, the Lightbringer series is like amazing, and it's like its own thing. Kind of reminds me of like Dune a little bit too. But yeah, anyhow, so I'm always open to like a cool sci-fi fantasy. As for sci-fi, I was such a nerdy kid. Like, I don't know. In like 6th grade, I was reading Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I was just obsessed with it, Dude, thank you, Peter. Yeah. It's kind of surprising. I think part of why the subscription level's been low is I haven't really been generating as much content. Like my subscription level was going up a lot when I was frequently blogging, but outside of like the 2 shows I do, we're not like I haven't really been encouraging people to like subscribe or anything or giving them a reason to, outside of just tuning in for that one show. So I'm kind of feeling like that's one of the things I'm thinking behind this stream, from a self-serving standpoint, is like it gives people more of a reason to be subscribed to my channel. So hopefully that will have an effect and up that subscription count. But I appreciate it, Peter. You are always a super huge support of just the comic community at large on Facebook. And so that's much appreciated, buddy. Nick said he was a test reader for Del Rey Books. They would send me a box every month for like 2 or 3. What? How do you get to be a test reader, dude? Tell me more about this. Like, this is why that kind of thing makes me want to read memoir from you, Nick. Like, you need to write a comic about. You should write a comic about that, because like that's a really good hook where you're like, I was a test reader for this book. Like, how? Like, I want to. It instantly makes me wonder what is that story. Because that sounds really cool. Also, I want free books. Should look into becoming a test reader. I need to get back into audiobooks. Used to listen on my long commutes. Have you read the 5th season? No, I haven't. Is this another recommendation? What is it, Chris? I'm curious about that. And then Nick said his sister was friends with an editor there. That's how you do it. You see, you gotta have those connections. Know the guy who knows the guy. That sounds cool though. What a cool experience to just get free books. That sounds super cool. I did luck out in the sense that like my mom was an English major and then my dad was like a super book nerd, so they had like a wealth of books around the house. Like we always had like a little um like we had more bookshelves in the house than furniture often growing up. And so it's like growing up with that where you have like most of the classics and stuff just sitting on the shelf is really cool, and probably did have a lot to do with that too. Plus it was cool because my dad had been a graphic designer back in the paste up days, and so he had a lot of like art books that were really cool. So he had a lot of Art of Disney books before people sort of had those books, and they were like those giant like ones that at that day and age you'd have to really seek out. And so it was cool because it's like I grew up like looking at that stuff, and I was fortunate, I think. But I was not fortunate enough to have an editor send me free books all the time. Yeah, audiobooks are cool. It's tough with audiobooks though, because like on a commute, it's great. If you're looking for something to sit down and read and you're reading more physical books, it's probably ideal. But I do enjoy, I really enjoy audiobooks a lot. And actually, my favorite series of audiobooks is really stupid, but it's fun. And you wouldn't think this because here I am like doing like a memoir and stuff, and like I should be like reading, serious stuff, and I do, but yeah, there's this whole series called Off to Be the Wizard, the Magic 2.0 series, and it is it is just like as an audiobook, it is one of my favorite audiobooks. It's hilarious. The characters are great. The voice actor who does all the characters like Philip the Wizard and stuff is great. And and I love the author, so it's like yeah, it's a really just absolutely hilarious series. it's a little bit in the vein of like a lot of the series that have come out recently that are kind of pop culture related. Like there's a lot of popular culture referenced in it, but it's written in such a kind of tender and caring way that it's not quite as sarcastic as like a, I don't know. I like it more than like the Ernst Klein stuff because it's just funnier, and it definitely has like a Douglas Adams vibe to it, like the type of humor. Um, Although it's a little friendlier. I don't know if that makes sense. Like Adams can be a little biting, um, and it's like a softer version of that. But yeah, I love those books. So if you're ever looking for an audiobook and you haven't listened to the Off to Be the Wizard series, dude, check those out. Well, I think it's called Magic 2.0. Sorry. So yeah, right. The Douglas Adams. When I was a kid, that was I discovered Douglas Adams. Not like I discovered him, but at this time, it's like kind of pre-discoveries online. It's not like you just look up like what's a funny sci-fi book or something, you know. And I remember what got me into Douglas Adams was my older brother mentioned it once, and then I kind of looked into it, and I found out that he was somehow related to Monty Python. And I want to say he used to write radio plays or something that they did. But anyhow, I could be wrong about that. Maybe I even heard the wrong info because that wasn't like an era in time where you could like Wikipedia it. And I'd look it up, but I want to finish this panel at some point. But anyhow, so and I had just gotten into Monty Python, and Monty Python, I would say, for my humor, like I think for most people my age, from who like comedy, like Monty Python's a huge part of that. Like I think that was the first time I saw humor where I was like, this is for me. Like this is not, and I mean, it's pretty broadly loved. So but I remember it just feeling so on the nose, and I was like, this is my crew of humor. Like, I just felt total ownership over it. Weirdly enough, I don't know if that makes sense, but I remember shortly after sort of being introduced to some Monty Python, and mostly the sketches that they used to play on PBS. Because I ended up like being introduced to the sketches and then Holy Grail and those other films much later on, like Life of Brian. And but anyhow, my point my point in bringing that up was I remember then checking out Douglas Adams and just being like, oh, this is the same. This is that hitting that same chord, like where it's like this is. I'm always bummed because I feel like that movie did somewhat justice to it, but I feel like they've never really been able to make like a live action that does full justice to that series of books. But I do remember after finishing all of the books, I'm being really excited because I think around the time I finished, they released that. And see, now I can't even remember the title of it, but there's this collected thick, you know, book with all the books. But then there ended up being like, I think a last one called like Restaurant at the End of the Universe or something like that, that was after the supposed finale. And that came out in paperback after the original collection because supposedly it was done, but then it wasn't. And I remember that day being like one of the first days I was like super excited about a book release. where I was like, I wrote down when it was coming out. I like went to the bookstore. Like, anyhow, so those are my like vivid memories regarding that. But dude, Terry Pratchett, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, dude. I love it. Oh man, I just cannot imagine a world where there's not so many cool books. And I think the love of books is like why we like a lot of us like making these things. You know, you really got to love books. It's funny too. I could probably make, and this goes to marketing or whatever. I could probably make a lot more money if I were more constantly pushing my ebook, because this is available. Like Two Stories is available on ebook as like you know, and I don't judge people who like ebooks, but when I'm promoting this, I like rarely, if ever, mention the ebook. I'm always trying to get people to buy the hard copy because I just know it'll be a better reading experience for them. Like I know it. Um, there's some things that are just meant to be physical books. So fun. Okay, I just did like the. I need to adjust this a little bit. But I was trying to do like a Hardy Boys type pose here, and I think I kind of pulled it off. Thinking, but I needed to adjust that eye to where it's more focused. Right? They're off to solve a mystery. Okay, cool. I also realized I need to employ some of my tricks here. So one of the things I hate, this is just a comic thing, but like one of the things I absolutely hate that I catch myself doing and I try to reverse is basically always having the floor panel like straight, and having like 90-degree angles or instantly defaulting to like uh, 90-degree angles, because it just makes for way less dynamic panels. So since they're running forward, like tilting that forward gives it more movement. Um, and so that's kind of what I want to do. And I might, like, the nice thing is with thumbnails, you can kind of get away with more. And I just realized you guys can't see the one I'm talking about. So basically, I just tilted that forward a little bit, so it wasn't on like, so all those lines weren't on a 90-degree angle. Sometimes I'll do this when I'm doing thumbnails because this will help me when I'm working on my finals to remember to not just cop out. This one, actually, I think that's okay because it's kind of like a moment of peace, so I don't mind that one being straight. This one I think could use a little bit of an angle. Although, yes, I like the idea of this being a little more angled. And then I will probably, because we're at the 3 hour mark, and what I do when I'm doing these streams is I take a very brief break at every hour, just because otherwise I would burn out and lose my mind. So I'm gonna basically wrap up like this portion of it, and then all I have left is one panel. So I can't like crash or leave at this point because yeah, we're almost there. So Yan mentioned uh, liking my commute videos that I used to do. And I really enjoyed those too. So I'm hoping that I can kind of get back to like sort of just community and dialogue and and a little bit of that vloggy nature to content, because I find that stuff a lot more fun and interesting. This too, I'm going to tilt a little bit, then I will take that little wee break. I am always amazed Like literally since starting this, I've been amazed when anyone shows up to the chats because it's always a bit of a gamble where I start and I'm like, I don't know, it's like pretty late. I don't think anybody's gonna be here. And then surprisingly, like it's just neat the community um, of people who kind of come and hang out and are weird and artistic uh, and thoughtful people. I love it. So, my point is it's just cool. All right. Now I'm gonna get. So we're getting close. I did my little mystery detective kind of panel. And now I have one last panel that's going to be super easy, and I will be back in about 2 seconds to do that. But I'm going to just head out for 1 second. I'll be right back. So I've talked about this a little bit with oh, I love that. Yeah, that's what I did for quite a few years on YouTube, like at first on my channel, and then it just became impossible to kind of continue editing them because I realized um, especially with a book deal for the second one where it's like I actually have to get this thing done at some point. So um and then also you get this little boost, and I'll actually say that to like encourage anyone who's like midway through like an epic project or something like that. It's like, and I think most of everybody in the chats or watching this have probably completed a comic, and it's like there's a thing about like that point where you finish and you see it in print and you get to like tell people about it and then people read it, and um even if it's not as many people as you like desire to have read it, or it's like not on the New York Times bestseller list or whatever, there's something really inspiring about that moment of like it being real, like this thing you built for years, like, or for months or whatever amount of time. The point where it becomes a tangible object that you can share with people and can have meaning for them is just so cool. So that's invigorating me to get the second one done faster because I also know there's readers now. Like there's, not a whole ton of readers, but there's readers, and enough readers of two stories that I feel obligated to like get this thing done as quick as I can. And so that's one of the things that kind of helps me push through, and also is motivating me to do this stream because I'm like, this also will in turn like hopefully create this like community um, of people who are just kind of building stuff, and we're working towards stuff, and that's what the show can be about. Like that's my thought on it. It's nerdy, but it's like I am really excited about getting this thing done. And I know I like the story. Like the script is pretty cool. I'm excited to be able to share this with you guys page by page, and then as it kind of gets crafted and becomes like a cool thing that I can know I did. And I think that helps me push through the weird thing that comics do, like they did tonight, where it's like this stream I thought would be potentially an hour or two, and here we're on hour 3. But the great thing about comics is I'm like, it's just one panel more. It just keeps me going. Like I think it's fascinating to constantly like push that bar a little bit and see like, hey, can I do this? It's kind of like that moment if you're lifting weights or whatever, where you're like, you finally realize like this is kind of easy. I wonder if I could like add a little weight to this, Like there's just a reward to that moment of like, that's the thing I love. And Nick, I agree with that too. Like, yeah, just doing more frequent posting. Of course, it's going to build more community because like I pay attention to content that's coming out, and it's hard. It's sad, but it's like, especially the way social media is wired, it's hard to like to do that. And also, I just kind of think it's cool to build a little hub where it's like, hey, I'm going to hang out and draw. You guys want to hang out and draw? Let's do it. like that's I think some of the funnest stuff. And actually, I've been enjoying listening to things like that when I'm working at my day job, because it feels like I'm hanging out and working on art with a group of people, and that's fun too. So, rambling. Okay, let's get this last panel finished. I'm really excited about everybody who showed up in the chats. I really appreciate it too. And it's funny, we've already found some weird connections, like Chris, Nick, you guys, well, and me. Like, it turns out we're all like, we probably have like, I'm sure like 1 degree of separation with people we physically know, which is really interesting. I like this. I like that. You might want to scale back the goal back. I used to have a rule for myself that I had to go to the gym. If I got on a machine and went home, it still counted. I'm a big fan of making goals so easy it's not hard to accomplish them. Well, that's kind of like what the thinking was originally on the 100 Days of Making Comics, right? Where, like when Kevin was coming up with that, I think the impetus was just like 30 minutes a day isn't like a hard goal to meet. Like it's hard if you haven't built the habit, but it's doable. But if you can do that, then like suddenly like I'm working 3 hours on this, and that doesn't seem as crazy, because of it. Okay, I gotta get this guy done. I also think as I get more accustomed to kind of rolling my own stream, like making my own stream, I do think I'll be more productive on the stream too, because I am a social being and I really enjoy conversation, and I will catch myself getting totally lost in conversation and then kind of having to remind myself like, oh yeah, like we're making comics too. So, but I like that too, because that can kind of help me forget the work. So this will be a quick one though. Like I actually think, you know what though? I don't like the head that low. That doesn't make sense. That's a lot of negative space. But this should be, it's funny, I should never say things in art like this will be quick. That's usually a setup for like, oh boy. I'm kidding though. I do think this will be a pretty fast panel. I want to actually have more of a, so it's going to be more zoomed in, so I might have to increase that hand. And I want to tilt this head. Yeah, because he's going to be basically looking at a peephole right now, and that kind of wraps this whole sequence up. The sequence in our apartment after the neighbor should be somewhat bookended by peepholes, which like that's the kind of nerdy stuff I love in the process of making these things. You try to kind of find these little rhythms and connections. So if you can have something like a sequence that starts with the people and kind of concludes with one, it's weird, but it's just like little moments like that keep me writing. and keep me invested in making these things, because it's you got to kind of take joy in your little victories. I agree with Nick talking about making them to where it's not impossible to accomplish them. Like Nick, you were talking about the gym, right? And it's like I found that I hate going to gyms. Like I hate, and this is just me, and I don't judge people who do, because I know it's kind of cool. There's more equipment, and you probably might get a better workout, and then you have access to trainers and all sorts of things that might be helpful, like, um, or if you're in like a small apartment and you don't have room for like gym equipment, like there's just all sorts of reasons why like going to the gym to work out's good. But like I'm a person who, like, I never had exercise habits. So I just feel weird and like conscious at a gym. Um, and then also I just know myself. I know, like, by the time I drive to the gym, and I get there, I'm gonna just make excuses, and then I'm gonna be wasting like this fee, you know, and I'm not gonna use the equipment, and I'll make more excuses, because now I'm in a position where All right, so I am back. I think Jan took off. I'm guessing. I don't know how many of you guys stuck around. Internet fun. Have a good night, guys. I'm literally wrapping up anyway, so it kind of worked out. And I did finish the panel, so you can thank Time Warner for that lapse in connection. But anyhow, I really appreciate everybody who showed up in the chats. Hopefully, I can kind of deal with that maybe in the morning, like these weird internet cutouts. They seem to happen around like maybe 3 in the morning. Yay, Peter's still there. That's awesome. I appreciate you guys hanging in there through the tried and true stream. But I do have to wrap that thought on gyms. So I'm just going to say, like, so the solution that I worked around with that was like I just I figured out ways that I could make working out very easy to do. So my excuses to not work out became really hard to make, because when my machine to work out is like right next to me, it's a hell of a lot harder to be like, oh well, I can't really drive to the gym. Like it just takes away excuses. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this stream. That's one of the reasons, I try to stick to a rigid habit of working on comics. I feel like if you can take away excuses and make it really hard for yourself to make excuses to do things you want to do, you end up making those things a lot more often. So that was my point. But I really appreciate you guys, my late night owls. If anyone here is joining from Twitch or watching along on Twitch, I'm going to have to check out how that works and stuff after. But this is my first time streaming on Twitch, and I appreciate it. If you guys haven't yet, dude, oh, that's such good news. Chris said he made some progress on a comic tonight. This is what this is about. Like, my thought is, let's hang out, let's draw, let's make stuff. And yeah, I really appreciate it. I made some progress too, so I really am stoked, you guys. That also wraps my day 27 of the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge. And yeah, see, we got a crew of people making stuff. Yeah, and so if you guys haven't, I think most of the people in the chats are already subscribed, but if you haven't yet, a really good way to keep in touch with this channel, because I'm going to be live streaming almost every night. Tomorrow actually is the one time where my stream will be in the week, other than 48-hour art check, which is on Mondays, where my stream will be sometimes on my channel and sometimes not. Tomorrow actually happens to be on my channel, but that's where we're doing art casters, and we're going to have David Chelsea on, and he's a really great artist, and so I recommend that. And that should start at around 9:00 p.m. And then who knows, I might stream after that. So anyhow, point being, there are streams coming up at random times, probably most of them at night. I'd imagine most of them will start around 9 or after. But there's a really easy way to keep track of that, which is make sure you're subscribed, make sure you hit that little bell if you're on YouTube. And then if you're on Twitch, subscribe to the channel, and you'll get notifications when it's about to go live. And that's the easiest way to kind of join in on this community. That was so fun tonight, where we get to talk about comics and creativity and making stuff. Thanks, Nick, Peter, Chris, like Jan, just like everybody who showed up in the chats. It's just been a lot of fun, and you guys also helped me get through my page. So I will see you guys when I see you, probably tomorrow, hopefully on Artcasters with Scott Cirkland and our special guest, and should be a good conversation. All right, guys, have a good night. Sleep well. I hope you had good productivity, and I'll see you next time. Bye.